je me sens bien là, hein. Rémi. Rémi. Non, c'est juste pour dire Rémi que ça va. Je me sens bien.
D'accord. Ah, ça commence vraiment quand ça.
Ah oui, c'est bon. Mais de toute façon, il y a quelqu'un d'autre avant moi, de toute façon.
Oui, il y a quelqu'un qui va vous faire la.
Mais vous savez pas qui c'est?
Si, la fille de. C'est Camille de Buenos Aires, enfin, c'est pas grave.
Elle est pas là?
Bah, si, elle est dans le coin.
Bah, je sais pas. Quoi mon téléphone? Wolfgang, c'est moi qui l'avais pas. Désolé. C'est moi qui l'avais dit. Ah, les naïgues. Sympa de venir. Sympa. Bravo, ça me fait plaisir. Ah, c'est vous qui allez...
Oui, bonjour, je vous introduis. Donc, je suis Camille, donc commissaire général de la Marine, directeur du Musée national de la
Ah,
Marine.
parfait.
Très bien.
Très
Donc,
bien.
dès que
juste ça et puis...
Voilà, et moi après je vous laisse la parole.
Moi je reste à côté de vous.
Exactement, voilà, tout à fait, tout à fait.
Ouais,
moi je me
bien.
cache après. Voilà, merci beaucoup. Je découvre des nouvelles missions tous les jours, donc c'est... je découvre des nouvelles missions tous les jours, donc ouais.
40 secondes.
Ouais, on va pas tarder.
Ça passe en fait
en direct, voilà, c'est pour ça qu'on a le topping et le, voilà, le lancement émission. Voilà.
Où est-ce qu'il est Peter qui est là-bas?
Vous avez tous vos intervenants dans la salle, ils sont tous là.
Peter,
Ok.
C'est juste le moment où j'aurais pas dit.
Oui, et puis vous êtes parti pour 3h30. Voilà. Je suis navrée pour vous. Hein. Ouais, je top.
La vidéo va être lancée.
Ah, la vidéo d'abord et après je lance. Ok, dès la fin de la vidéo. Super, merci beaucoup.
3, 2.
Ouais, donc là, décompte, vidéo. Un petit jingle. Bonjour à tous. Presque. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue au
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the One Nation Summit today. At 2 o'clock, we have this forum on the cultural heritage, and it will be led by the director of the museum here in Strasbourg on Marine Museum. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure, as you can imagine, for us to welcome you here today. The National Museum of the Navy is honored to be able to welcome you here to this forum on sea culture, culture of the sea. And this is One Ocean Summit, which is organized by the President of the Republic, Monsieur Emmanuel Macron, whom we all know. So we'll be together this afternoon for 3.5 hours. So I hope that you're all sitting comfortably and you're comfortably installed here in this room this afternoon, well settled, because this is an historic meeting for world maritime culture, as you all know, and heritage, of course, as you know. 60% of the world population lives less than 150 kilometers from the coasts, around seas and oceans. Many peoples, and there are all kinds of different special characteristics and know-how which has been established there, ancestral traditions, and these constitute very special societies. One of the first, this is because they live very, very close to the sea. Now, around seas and oceans, a man looks at existence and the sea. This is something which is fed by technical and marine knowledge in the course of history. It's led by reason, but also by that of the imagination as well at the same time, about seas and oceans. Throughout the generations, cultural heritage of an exceptional nature has been formed. So the treasures of the past, as well as cultural living today, this is absolutely priceless heritage, and this is why our President of the Republic wanted to look at this whole question of our maritime heritage. And this is part of our program dealt with the protection and the governance of the seas. It is essential, and sometimes there have been culture. Culture is part of the protection and the governance of oceans, and this is very, very healthy indeed that we should be dealing with this. Because yes, it's true to say that maritime culture, maritime heritage in all its richness, its diversity, whether it is material, immaterial, that is full part of the way in which our oceans are a shared heritage which we need to share and we need to enhance and make the most of, because maritime culture is an exceptional way to make sure that we have a deeper knowledge of the seas, because this cultural heritage should encourage people to become aware at world level that we are all depositories of a common heritage with challenges that we must meet together. In France, the Minister of Culture, Roselyne Bachelot, and the Minister of the Seas, Annie Jourdain, they asked Henri Masson, and he's over there later on if you want to see him at some stage, who is the national protector and conserver of national heritage, a special edition and broadcast on the maritime heritage. This will be available in a few weeks' time. Now, of course, it is very important to be able to embed this in our protection of the oceans and the governance of the oceans, because they have a lot of unsuspected treasures. But, of course, our heritage is covered by this. Our oceans are fragile, as we know. We must all become mobilized to protect them. We must protect our cultural heritage. And this also forces us to do the same. And this is why this afternoon, what we intend to do is to provide maritime heritage and its culture its full place in the discussion about oceans, looking at different approaches, cross-referencing our views, sharing innovative ideas, and putting forward proposals for the future. So we have set up the program this afternoon of this first and historic meeting this afternoon based on three main necessities. One, it's necessary to become aware of the wealth and diversity of maritime culture. And secondly, it is urgent. It is urgent, I repeat, urgent, to protect maritime cultural heritage by actions of preservation, conservation, and restoration. And finally,
partager
an
au
opportunity
plus grand nombre
to
ses
share
patrimoines
with the
à
greatest
travers
number
des
of
actions de
people
sensibilisation,
by means
d'éducation et de
of
transmission.
raising awareness, education,
Trois axes donc.
and passing on
Conscience,
this awareness.
soin,
So,
partage.
awareness, care,
En anglais,
and share. In English,
Aware, care and share. Trois mots qui doivent nous guider aujourd'hui.
3 words
Un
which should
programme,
guide us.
j'espère,
A
riche et
program which I
enthousiasmant.
hope will be
Nous attendons
rich
qu'avec des
and
intervenants
which will, in fact,
internationaux de haut niveau,
give us
que je remercie
huge
chaleureusement
impetus. And I would like to thank our very high-level participants
pour
this
saluer
afternoon.
également
And I would also
les
like to
nombreux
take
participants
advantage
présents ici à Brest,
of welcoming the many
sont inscrits
participants
sur
here in Brest, or those of us who are following us online. There's hundreds of you, I'm glad to say.
à l'image de la
And
communauté maritime,
like the
nous voici
community of the sea, we are here met over and beyond our borders. So welcome to this first international forum, One Ocean Heritage.
Pour lancer officiellement
And
ce forum,
to officially
Madame
launch
Geneviève
this,
Dariussec,
Madame Geneviève Dariussec, who is the
ministre des
minister responsible
chargée de la
for the
mémoire et
ministers
des
of
Arts
armies and veterans. She is the special minister who has been, in fact, appointed for the seas, and she will honor us by presenting us a few words on screen. And we hope we will hear them well enough to translate them for you. As part of French Polynesia, ladies and gentlemen, whether we see it from space or whether we sail its waters, whether we explore its depths, you can read it, and we gaze at it from the cliffs, the ocean is what links us to the world. Our planet ocean. That should in fact be called a planet ocean, and we are the frail skiffs that sail on this ocean. The ocean is a completely different country. It is the largest on our planet. It has also been a unique link throughout all the ages of humanity. Human history is inextricably bound with mankind's maritime vocation. Our common history is inseparable from the sea, from the ships, from sailors, from the seafarers of our world. Ocean therefore has its own shared culture because of this. We have maritime heritage, oceanic heritage that transcends civilizations and generations, that shapes identities, that nourishes our imagination. This heritage is one of our undeniable riches at national, international level, and that has left its mark on the memory of our nations. And like the diversity of natural maritime environments and the extraordinary biodiversity that they contain, this cultural heritage is essential, pluralistic, and has a multitude of faces: lighthouses, ports, ships, wrecks, underwater archaeological discoveries. Our maritime cultural heritage is also a living heritage, an infinite sort of stories, narratives, and adventure. The maritime environment is a recurring theme in tales and legends. We have all been rocked as babies by the sea. We have immersed ourselves in the exciting adventures of sea captains. We have admired, and we still admire, the great ocean navigators. This influence can be heard in our everyday expressions and words. Do we not navigate? Do we not surf the web? This maritime heritage is a common good which belongs to the whole of humanity. It is heritage that is greater than us individually. It is a treasure that is priceless, which we must protect it, and we must take care of it, and we must share it. We need to enjoy it with the greatest number of human beings. While I believe in the power of the younger generations, I also want to believe that our generation, that every generation is capable of playing its part in this small revolution too. France supports and will continue to support all those actions aimed at protecting the oceans and also raising awareness about this importance. Uniting around this common heritage, We want to capitalize or make people aware of the vulnerabilities and challenges of the ocean. We want to understand better the risks that lie in wait for us. Here, too, we have an obligation to pass on this torch. And the French Minister of the Armed Forces is working closely together with the Ministry of the Seas to do this. And I think that all the actions carried out by the French Navy and by the remarkable network of the National Museum of the Navy, France, which is an archipelago which is washed by the waters of 4 main oceans, becomes a second ocean power and has manifest responsibility in terms of a culture in this field. And we are all aware of this. And we know as well that it is coordinated global action to be built. This forum will enable us to share our different perspectives as researchers, as actors in the field of culture. And I'd like to thank the organizers, and I'd like to thank all the participants here too. I would like to say that this multidisciplinary approach, legal, geographical, at many different levels, will, I hope, allow us to advance our thinking on the definition of maritime heritage, its cultural footprint, and the need to protect it for the benefit of humanity. Peter Thompson, appointed as the special envoy to the ocean by the Secretary General of the United Nations, recently declared there is no healthy planet without a healthy ocean. And 2022 offers key opportunities to stop the decline in ocean health. I would like to add, we cannot stop this decline without acknowledging the powerful heritage of the ocean. And this is something which is shared by all of us, whole of humanity. So let us look out towards the horizon and towards the open seas. Thank you very much indeed.
Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you very much.
Puissamment patrimonial et commun à l'humanité.
Being aware of this cultural heritage is indeed very important, and that resonates with the commitment of Mr. Minister in charge of culture, in charge of craftsmanship, in the government of French Polynesia, who will join me on stage, and it is really a pleasure to
Au cœur de l'océan Pacifique de la Polynésie
so at the heart of the French Polynesia in the French overseas, comprising 180 islands, outstanding cultural and natural heritage of spreading over 1 million square kilometers. That is the entire surface of area of Europe. So you are our honored guest to deal with the topics that are of interest today. What is your vision so as to preserve our maritime heritage? What is urgent to preserve this heritage? You're the Minister of Culture, but also of Environment. So you shall tell us more about this and how these challenges are linked. Mr. Minister.
Totemona nuia hyvä, kiaura, yorana, bula vinaka. Merci pour ces petits mots d'introduction.
Thank you for these kind words of introduction.
Mon nom, donc c'est Hirimona.
So my name is Mihirona Doritabu, to be simple, really.
Je voudrais vous saluer tous en vos
noms et en vos grades. Greet you all. I shall not tell too much about the material heritage, but to respond to the different questions, I wanted before anything to talk about 3 concepts that we do have in French Polynesia, which are very important. The first one being the approach we have to nature without any human being. The human being is part of the universe, just like a star, a wave, a shell, or a fish. Each element has a specific place, and everything is intertwined.
que l'on retrouve
Second concept we find in French Polynesia and in the Pacific Ocean, the Fenya, the land cannot be separated from the moana, the water, the oceans, and conversely, what happens
que l'on ressent
on the shores will have consequences at sea. And conversely, the third concept is that the ocean, for all Polynesian people, is a great marriage. It is a temple, a natural temple. It is not an obstacle. It is a way, a pathway, an avenue where we live, where we fish, where we travel.
rencontre
That's an area where people meet up. For all the people of the Pacific Ocean, this is a common heritage. So on the basis of these three concepts were built our rules and our customs that we still use today. So on the basis of these three concepts, the
française ont aussi
respective governments of the French Polynesia have built the policies so as to preserve and protect our species and the biodiversity for the last 70 years. I want also to talk about the cultural heritage concept and how I understand this concept. And to do that, I want to talk about the fact that the land cannot be separated from the ocean. We rediscover this as well here
prolifération des algues aux
by
embouchures
stating there are more and more algae at the mouth of the rivers leading into the ocean because of agriculture, but also whales come from the Antarctic oceans
polynésiennes.
to
Cet
give
arrivée coïncide
birth
exactement
to
avec
their
la
youngsters.
du happer,
And
un
this
arbre à fleurs rouges
comes at the same time with the blossoming of the aber,
dont on utilise
blossoming of the flavanus.
nos maisons,
We are using the
des paniers, des chapeaux,
dry
l'arrivée du
vegetables,
oeo, le bec
and that announced the oeol, which is a fish, which is very much loved by
va,
the
la
people
pirogue,
of Polynesia.
est utilisé
And then the rafting, the raft that is being used on land as well, and is
traditionnel,
being also used to mention
lequel
a given area of land on which had to be
une pointe, une rivière.
mountain, a peak,
Dans son livre
and the mouth of the river.
de la Polynésie publié par
In
la Société
the book
d'Océanisme,
published by the
l'anthropologue
Society of Oceanists in 2003, Oli Guyot mentioned that the ocean is the common and vital space, so has to enter other area full of gods and spirits. So this area is filled by Mara, the spirits, and of course there is a symbiosis that exists between the seafarers,
une étoile, une vague, un
and
oiseau,
it
un
is part
paupière.
of the universe, just like a star. This travel was not a challenge but to the ocean, but it was rather a meeting
Seul le
with
respect de
those
son
elements.
environnement,
Only the respect of this marine environment
d'arriver à
would
destination.
allow to
Je voudrais
reach
aussi
its
parler
goal.
de gestion,
I want also to talk about management
non pas
of
de gestion des espaces
our
maritimes, de
maritime
le concept, mais de
areas,
gestion traditionnelle.
but the
Nous
traditional
avons essayé tous les
management.
autres concepts,
We have
ça ne marche pas.
tried all
Nous
the
sommes
other
donc
concepts, but it doesn't
à
work.
nos
So
méthodes
we
traditionnelles.
came back to our
Parler du
traditional ways of
On
management.
retrouve
I want,
aussi partout
I'm
maintenant.
thinking about the Maori,
Le
which is
Rahui, c'est
being
un espace
used
terrestre
in
ou
the
marin,
Polynesian
sur lequel,
Islands. It
comme l'indique
is
notre code de l'environnement,
space either
non
on land or
dicté par un
at
impératif de
sea,
gestion des ressources
in
sont
which
appliquées de
rules
manière
and
traditionnelle.
regulations are being used and applied in a traditional manner.
Ou des ressources naturelles
So
pour une
the-
durée déterminée
for
et
given
une zone délimitée
bit of time,
permettent aux ressources
this allows the resources considered
et
to
d'être
be
suffisantes
rebuilt
quand
and
le
to
Rahui
be
est levé.
sufficient when
Le plus
the
connu
Rahui
est celui de
is
l'île de
there.
Rapa,
The more
tout au
famous
sud de la
is
Polynésie,
the one pertaining
l'archipel
to
des
the
Australes. Le second,
island of Rapa Nui. The second
au
one
large de Montréal, pas
is
très loin de Paris.
located close
Mais
to
d'autres existent aussi.
Maura, not too far from Tahiti, but other exits in the Tuamotu Islands. The management of this area is
Et se caractérise
dealt with by the Council of the Elders. There are non-written rules, but
pas de
there are
contrôleur assez
respected by everybody. There is no policeman, no controllers who actually make sure that the rules are being respected, but these rules are being respected and abided by the local communities. So the monitoring by the police forces is not good enough because human beings need to sleep, of course. But the monitoring, the surveillance made by our elders who have left us is always present. They have not left us. The answer to one of these questions is that there is a cultural heritage here. It's not only maritime heritage, it is our heritage, and this heritage must be preserved. Of course, the tongues, the languages, the songs, the dances, the visions of the world, and each of them is important because all of those tell the tale of our world. September 1936, and that is something which September 7, 1936, the last tiger of Tasmania disappeared, and the world, of course, was astonished by this news. But 60 years before, Truganini disappeared, and Truganini was the last Aborigine woman in Tasmania. But nobody worries about the fact that she disappeared at that time. But having said that, I think that if we had been able to preserve and maintain those people, their languages, these people could have tell us how this animal was extraordinary, outstanding, and how they were able to live with that tiger for 1,000 years. When we started to work on the policy for the preservation of the mammals, we, of course, did that on the basis of our traditions. Just to recall that these animals were our ancestors, our Taola, who were reincarnated in totem protecting animals. So one of my totem actually is a shark, and this was much harder for tortoise because only the elders were eating them during religious ritual, but the missionaries actually ate them so in order to show that the power of the Polynesian god was not good anymore, and therefore the meat of the tortoise became common in the islands. But we were able to preserve this animal, preserving our languages, our words, our terms, of course, explains who we are, and by doing so we can be proud of our heritage, of who we are, what we have done for hundreds of years, the knowledge of the nature, of the interaction that exists within our ecosystems, our geography, and our history. Preserving our heritage is not always very simple, because some people look down on us. Modern people look down on native communities, and that is a big challenge. So we must fight for this so that our words, our cultural heritage is accepted and recognized for what it is by everybody. The Captain Kavina Kapahi and the navigators No Puerlu, Kokulea, were able to do a trip for a month, a journey at sea, and they were able to reach Tahiti after a month, and they did show to the modern scientists that our ancestors were able to cross the ocean 1,000 years. So then that team of seafarers reached Tahiti, and they were greeted by hundreds of people on dinghies and small boats. What other examples can we use? I do not want to mention websites or apps for smartphones. I really want to be
Il faut puiser aussi dans nos
down to earth, really. I want to use our traditions, resources, and to reinvent our traditions. I want to come back to our roots. That's what we did with our educative maritime area. The first one was actually implemented in 2012 on a very small island in the Marquise Archipelago upon the initiative of a primary school. And even for all the school children and the educative communities, of course, are very much aware of the nature around them. The final goal was not the preservation of that nature. Of the school children there learn algebra and mathematics by counting the fishes you can see in the water and so on. So the school will do similar actions to that of dedicated and protected maritime area, so that our the children can become those who will preserve the nature in the future, and that is really compulsory to do so. In our languages, we distinguish for some species of fish different terms according to the development of the fish. So those different terms allow the fishermen to know at which time it is possible to catch a given fish and at which time the fisherman should leave that fish in the water. I think that there exist more than 300 educative maritime areas in the French territories. So this concept, of course, can be used elsewhere. So that is also the heritage we must pass on to our children. Sometimes the most efficient solutions already exist in our cultures and heritages in order to fight the use of single-use plastic bags. In Polynesia, we have worked on promoting the traditional baskets made of natural fabrics, natural materials, prior to trying to find alternative solutions, allowing our local artisans and craftsmen to rediscover the gesture they were doing previously and to make a decent living from that. To respond to the last question pertaining to culture and environment, even though I already said quite a lot about it, we think that the lack of link would be inconceivable, really. That would mean that human being is above its ecosystem, whereas it is actually well in its system, and the human being actually has part of the solution, part of the answer. We must, of course, change our behaviors. Human beings should no longer be disconnected from their environment. As I said previously, we must take into account the traditional know-hows. And I said that sometimes people look down on us, and I was surprised by this when I studied here in France. But, you know, common sense from the farmers in France says that also. It is like a summary of the observations made by people for centuries and sometimes millenniums. And this should be opposed to modern science. What we do in our islands, of course, we use a traditional know-how so as to support modern science, modern sciences. In Polynesia, the term nature does not exist as such, because there is no frontier, no barriers between the world of the human beings and that of the animals, or any other living creatures, and that of the God, of course. And our parents have, well, created a new term, which is natura, because they had to do so, but that was not meaningful to anybody. So we invented a new word, Alu Mari Taiva, which means literally forest, the sea, and the sky. And as said, the group of the Polynesian leaders, and I want to pay tribute to the former president of that group, Mr. Pula, we are the people living in the biggest ocean of the world. For us, the people of the oceans, we must be resilient to the climate change consequences, and we must remain truthful to our culture and history. The people in the Pacific Oceans live in a wide number of small islands. We live on an ocean of islands, really. Our continent is made of water, Martina Aniva, and that is our common heritage, and that has been so for 1,000 years. What will happen in the islands of Taiwan will have consequences elsewhere on the other shores of other islands in our ocean, and that has been true for thousands of years. So we want really to strengthen and further the links that exist between our people, and we want really to put the people of Polynesia at the heart, the center of our concerns. Of course, the human being must be at the heart of its environment. This, unlike the traditional time, that the time in Polynesian Ocean follows a cycle. This cyclic nature of time comes with a technology that respects nature, whereas modern invasive technologies want them to be independent from the nature. So people say we are the ocean in our islands. In order to conclude, where we talking about the importance of the oceans, the preservation of our maritime heritage in the Pacific Oceans, the islands are already facing the climate change consequences. I shall conclude by saying that the message we want to pass on today in this One Ocean Summit is that one, we, the people of the Pacific Ocean, are calling to the people to take care of the oceans, really. Thank you.
Maruru ere moana.
Mararu Eremoana. Thank you very much for telling us such a deep, profound and moving message. Thank you for delivering it. It was a great pleasure to listen to you, to come back to the essential things. We've got far away from the essence of things. We've got internet sites and so on. You wanted to come to see us here today. You have shed us very powerful light on values. Since we would like to talk about how urgent it is to preserve our heritage, is to make sure that we are capable of looking after the ocean. And this is the subject of the next roundtable. I would like to invite Vincent Boit-Ferlier, who is the conserver of heritage, the scientific director of the National Navy Museum. And also we've got Matthew Tanner from Bristol. We've got Arnaud Chamois and Lars Amreos. And we've also got Benedict Donnelly, who will be joining us by video link. And so thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Just waiting for everyone to get settled. Well, the object of this first roundtable is going to be to talk about the subjects of preserving our maritime heritage. And of course, we need to protect them more than we protect them more than we know about it. And as the minister said in her introductory statement, we want to have maritime diversity, and this is something which is multitude and multitudinous, and it is very pluralistic. We tend to sometimes make an opposition between natural and cultural heritage. And as our Minister for the French Polynesian Minister has just said, these two subjects are very closely linked. You cannot dissociate them. And so we can't say that humans are divided from nature and from natural environment. So in this roundtable now, we're going to try to deal with this question of knowledge of our heritage and to try to find out how we can identify in order to get to know better our heritage and to preserve it better, thanks to using dedicated instruments, specific instruments and tools, which will make it possible to preserve, if not restore, these instruments of heritage, whether they're primary or secondary prisoners. And there's a question, of course, of legislation in first place. And I think that sometimes the speakers who are with us this afternoon will be able to come back on these subjects, will tell us about the legislative aspects, because that is part of our summit here too. And now around this table, we're lucky enough, we have very honoured to have with us Mr. Matthew Tanner. You are the President of the International Congress of Maritime Museums, and Mr. Arnaud Chaumas, who is the Director of Subaquatic and Submarine Researchers for the Minister of Culture in France. So we've got Mr. Lars Amrios, who is the Director of the Museum of History of Maritime Affairs in Sweden. We've got Madame Solange Majorot, who is a national person responsible for maritime affairs of the Ministry of Seas for lighthouses. And then we've got Mr. Benedict Donnelly, who is the ex-president of the Association Hermione Lafayette. So, Mr. Tanner, a question, please. A question to you from the as the president of the International Congress of Museums. What is your knowledge of the variety and diversity of maritime heritage? And could you tell us how you envisage the definition of maritime cultural heritage? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mesdames et Messieurs. It's a pleasure to be here, and good afternoon, everybody. Could I have the first slide, please? As I want to address that question and bring to you a flavour of the maritime museum world and how I think it has a role to play in part of the big picture that we are talking about in this fantastic forum. So my name is Matthew Tanner. I have the pleasure of looking after this ship, but I am the president of the International Congress of Maritime Museums, ICMM, which represents some 120 maritime museums in 36 countries on virtually every continent of the world. And that's very important to us all, isn't it? It's all over the world. And what I want to say is that by definition, of course, what we are doing in maritime heritage is transoceanic. It's across the oceans. It's reaching a hand across the sea to other peoples, and is therefore international. But it's also, maritime heritage is all-encompassing. It embraces everything in human history, including the contemporary. And I was asked a question earlier this morning about the use of the word maritime in English, in British English, because we also use the word marine. And I think that confuses lots of other people because they are not quite the same thing. Maritime is used to mean those things that relate to man's interaction with the sea, with the oceans. And marine is the fish and the sea, the environment. And of course, that subtle separation in British English is perhaps one of the causes of all our problems, where we are separating things out into separate boxes and not seeing the whole picture. So really, maritime and marine should come together as one indivisible world. So how I want to talk about that is in terms of what maritime museums, I think, can do. Dr. Peter Burke, in his book about history in 1991, said, maritime museums may succeed over other history museums in exemplifying social history because they are concerned with virtually every human activity. Now, that is a powerful message. I think we're beginning to see that a maritime museum can be a place that can be all-encompassing the processes, the tools, the environments of human interactions, give us a portrait of the world and who we are in it. And this is a serious business for serious museums. Though former director of the National Maritime Museum in Britain, in England, did once say that maritime museums may have substituted a dream world of jolly Jack Tars and billowing canvas in place of the hard realities of finance, business, organisation, social isolation of the seafarer, with all the effects that causes, cargoes, physical dangers, boredom, and sheer hard work. Well, he may be right, but the romanticism of the sea, the ability of the seascape to capture us with its scale and its beauty and its ever-changing faces, which beguile, has been very powerful. But he's only half right, I think, because yes, of course, we must tell real stories of real people. We must tell the good and the bad to the best of our rigorous knowledge and research. And whether it's national triumph at sea or the horrors of the international slave trade, whether it's overt nationalism of major ships trading around the world or the hard grind and poverty of small fishing communities, in my experience, visitors to our museums, our maritime heritage museums around the world, are far more engaged with real stories, with what it was really like. They really want to feel what it is all about. And perhaps the best and most striking way of illustrating this is, of course, with the ships. In fact, could we go one slide forward, please? That's backwards. There we go, thank you. Ships, of course, and I can't talk anywhere without talking about ships. The largest artifact, the largest moving artifact built by man, a floating microcosm of society which creates globalism in its own right and exploits the sea, but is ultimately controlled by the sea too. These are the museum objects that stir the soul and open up unlimited horizons of the oceans. And many maritime museums around the world have been and are centred on historic ships, sometimes many more than one. I would say, actually, that I think usually one is quite enough. But the sheer effort of looking after a ship may also serve to hide the bigger picture. Not only whether the ship is telling her stories to visitors in an effective and fun way, but if the primary business of a maritime museum is to depict ships and where they travel, every land reached by ships and their cargoes or their passengers should also get a voice. This is a big responsibility for all maritime museums and embraces again the idea from Burke that maritime museums are concerned with virtually every human activity. So surely, if maritime museums can be so central to world history and culture, why are they not considered to be more important than they are as cultural institutions in their own countries and worthy of support and fame and so forth? Even the largest of all, the National Maritime Museum in London, is treated as a second-class museum compared to the big central London art museums. Next slide, please. I could go on about the... is there another slide? Yes, this is my picture of fine art museums and how interesting they are compared to maritime museums. Sorry, that's not in the text. I could go on about the dominance of art museums in public perceptions of cultural institutions, and I'm sure everyone here recognises this. It stems in part from the elite value that decorative and fine art often has in the sale room, and the awe that they're held within. But we must not take, also of course it is, the sea is perhaps not at the forefront of people's minds as much as it once was, but we must not take either of those 2 points as barriers. Rather, in this day and age, it seems timely to shape our maritime museums very much as part of a contemporary need and rebuild them at the centre of international culture, because they embrace the whole of human culture. So let us be clear. Maritime museums have more to say about the contemporary world than many other museums. This is becoming apparent already in academic research. There appears to be a shift away from self-centred imperial and colonial history towards a more holistic maritime and international history. The recent winner of the Wolfson History Prize in the UK was The Great Sea by David Abulafia, which is the really first-class synthesis of human history in terms of ocean and maritime history. And maritime museums can and should be at the heart of three great challenges of our age. There's migration, climate change, and international relations. The stories of migration through the ages, both voluntarily, militarily, or through slavery, have profoundly affected the world, and they profoundly affect people's lives today. This is an example of a contemporary issue that will not go away. It is living history that the Maritime Museum should and can take on as its own and speak out for the long and complex history of ocean migration. Equally relevant, as you can see in the slide, thank you, is the marine environment of this blue planet, which is both beautiful and, next slide please, only can be a disaster at that interface between the maritime and the marine. Only a few maritime museums give equal weight to the marine ecosystems from which all maritime activity is actually derived. And of course, the environment is very much under threat. So we are all linked by the sea. And of course, like 70% of the world's population, the sea is a shared resource. And in our contemporary world, this sense of free mixing of peoples and exchange of goods and ideas is often lost in the cloud of politics. And so my final slide, as maritime museums all over the world, we can and do embrace the international and reach across the seas to each other. I would certainly like to see ICMM encourage even more interaction between members, and that's what I'm determined to do in my presidency, but also unite with one voice, particularly on the issues of migration and climate change. So maybe this is a bit of a call to arms. This is the challenge. Why don't we agree now that all national maritime museums around the world should be renamed so that they are now international maritime museums and take their place as important and essential institutions for everybody. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Matthew. C'était passionnant, je pense que 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It was really interesting.
Je vous ai pas coupé parce que vous avez même anticipé mes questions.
You have actually anticipated some of my questions, so that is perfect at allowing me to transition with Mr. Arnaud Chomas from the Ministry of Culture. So you mentioned the intangible heritage. Also, the invisible heritage is another issue. The heritage is also very fragile when it comes to archaeological assets. How does the DRASM work, operate so as to protect archaeological assets and heritage? So what are you doing?
Merci Vincent.
Thank you, Vincent.
La première spécificité du DRASM,
well, the first
elle est historique.
Particularity or specificity of DRASM is to be the oldest research center dedicated to maritime archaeology, set up under the patronage of Mr. André Malraux, the then Minister of Culture. So 10 years after the dive made by Commandant Cousteau in the Mediterranean seas, and after this event, we came up with the idea that having divers on one side and archaeologists on the other side, not working together, that led to different issues when it comes to the interpretation, understanding of those assets. Cousteau discovered some assets in 1973 and were understood in 1980 only. So it took actually 20 years, a generation, to do the full work and to understand what was at stake here. So, what makes this service unique, really, and Vincent mentioned this previously, is that we must, well, know, care, and share. So our service, in order to know what exists, to make some inventories, our service was provided with some research vessels. The service was set up in 1966, and we had in 1966 the first research vessel. Things were much more simple from the administrative point of view and the budget point of view. At that time, we since came up with two new research vessel, André Malraux and the Alfred Verlin, which was launched last year, which has completed recently its very first mission off the coast of Corsica. So those ships are well equipped to cater for archaeologists and to provide them with the technological support so as to further and promote and work on the national archaeological map, where we actually document, register all the archaeological assets within our territories. And since archaeology exists, the number of known sites has experienced an exponential growth, but we do know that there are a huge number that remains to be discovered. What is interesting is in this specialty, we are only a branch of archaeology, actually. We know now that lots of wrecks and many sites have been forgotten.
L'archéologie sous-marine,
the maritime archaeology, just like traditional archaeology, seeks to bring back to the common knowledge and common memories sites and artifacts that existed in the past. Not only we do work on wrecks or tangible assets, but all that makes these heritage forgotten, lost, destroyed harbors, for instance. And we are doing some work so as to understand the rising levels of the oceans over a long period of time. We are working on the Mesolithic forest along the shores of the Languedoc, that is in the Bay of Biscay in the southern western part of France. And we are working with archaeologists with tools that are those used by modern scientists, so as to go beyond the work that can be done by individual divers. Malraux said in 1966 it's about time to work on this. And archaeologists at the time started to do that by themselves. We are using, having said that, a given level of infrastructures and manning capacities. So we really wanted to develop tools so as to go beyond that depth that we have explored so far, and to be able to work from the ship, just like an archaeologist would do at depths that go beyond the human capacities, beyond where mankind can work and live. So
celle d'un navire de guerre français.
We illustrate this on a wreck of a ship, a French naval military ship that was actually forgotten. So after a century, nobody said, where is that frigate, that military ship? It's the first of its kind, which was quite important for French Navy at the time. But even so, it was forgotten. And of course, all the crew died during these tragic events. So we found it by chance, thanks to several tools, and those given tools helped us to study it at a depth of more than 1,000 meters. We were able to take more than 50,000 pictures, still pictures, to do what is called a photogrammetry. On this picture here, what you can see is the fact that the robot we used shed a light on the wreck. Of course, the robot brings power. There's a cable that allows to bring back information to the ship. So we have used more than 1,000 100,000 lumens, sorry, shedding a light that would not be feasible otherwise. So we can see the wreck as it could be observed and recreated. This wreck cannot be saved anymore. Yes, it has suffered the damages of corrosion. First of all, the rust, and of course, bacteria that are eating the metal. And this is the rear part of the ship, which was the most damaged part during the attack. It's only a metallic cast now, and this wreck could not be saved or brought back to the sea surface anymore or at land anymore. So what was at stake here was actually to provide the scientific community with as much information and evidences, pictures, artifacts that we could do. And this is a mock-up, a 3D mock-up that has been generated by the ipso facto company, and that it is this company is based in Marseille. So on the basis of the more than 50,000 pictures that we took under the water, so you can use 3D glasses so as to visit the wreck, have impression. So this 3D mock-up will be in a museum in Paris, of course. The wreck suffered corrosion and the consequences of bacteria. Could you tell us how we can improve things at the international level? How can we improve the preservations of archaeological assets and artifacts at the international level? Well, France was one of the drivers, so has to prepare the Convention of UNESCO pertaining to the subaquatic assets in 2001, even for a very specific legislation point and sovereignty. France took more than a decade to ratify and sign that convention, that thing that has been signed now. So it is a commitment of 71 countries since at the beginning of autumn. The Republic of the Dominican Republic, sorry, also signed that convention. First of all, the archaeological heritage is under the water. Of course, it is in situ. It must remain where it is. Except when it is endangered, and when it is endangered, of course, we must document and take as many evidences, pictures, and as we can, so as to replicate or study it in the future. So we must use all the legislative tools that we have. We must also further and improve the international elements of laws, both at national and international levels. And we must also educate and raise the awareness of the people about this. I do not think that the divers, either professional or amateurs, shall damage really those wrecks. It's all about education, and I think that maritime cultural areas is only for adults and for people. Yes, 10 minutes, okay, that's great. And we shall now hear from Lars Andreas, because this topic of education, awareness raising is at the heart of the actions carried out by the Swedish museums, but I think that the Vasa Museum, a terrible
site culturel, vous avez réfléchi,
could have took place, and then you thought about during the last months how you could change the paradigm, how you could bring more people on the sites. So can you please tell us about more about this?
Merci et bonjour. It's a pleasure
Good afternoon.
to start off with to be at this very important conference, and I would like to take the opportunity to actually congratulate the French chairmanship for including the heritage into these discussions about the ocean. Without heritage, it wouldn't be a whole. So congratulations to the French chairmanship. Well, I've been given a huge topic to talk about. How do we engage the public in maritime heritage? And it's a huge topic, and there is so little time. So you'll have to forgive me for being very selective and being very brief. And I want to focus on the issue of the underwater cultural heritage. And of course, being responsible for among other museums, the Vasa Museum, as you see in the picture, it's very natural for me to start off with the Vasa, which, as some of you may know, was a Swedish warship. It sunk on its maiden voyage in 1628. It was a huge disaster, of course. Lives were lost, and the king lost what was supposed to be his biggest ship in the fleet. But the Vasa was salvaged in 1961, and since then it has been a huge success. It is now one of the most visited museums in Sweden, and it is known around the world. I'm not going to talk a lot about the Vasa. Some of you may know it, but I think the point I want to make here, that 1961 with the salvage of the Vasa was sort of a starting point, I think, for a lot of the things that have come since in disseminating, in sharing maritime heritage. The Vasa provided a platform, resources for a lot of things that were to come. Now, obviously, there are huge amounts of wrecks in the oceans. I think in the Baltic alone, we estimate there are around 100,000 wrecks. So we cannot bring them all to the surface and exhibit them like the Vasa, of course. So how do we make accessible the heritage that is still below the water? How can we engage the public in that heritage? I'll get back to that, but let me just reflect very briefly on, I think, what is one of the advantages of maritime heritage when it comes to engaging a wider audience. Because maritime heritage encompasses, dramatic and also a lot of tragic stories about the terrible forces of nature, of war, of ships being wrecked, of death, despair, loss, fear, grief, but it also encompasses a lot of, dramatic rescues and courage. And so I think it's no wonder that maritime heritage actually attracts a great deal of interest from the public. It's very easy to connect emotionally to a lot of the maritime heritage. It is at the same time, of course, a heritage that provides knowledge about peaceful meetings, about trade, but also about migrations and other stories. So to me, I would like to join Mr. Tanner in emphasizing that to me, maritime heritage is very much international. It's an integral part of our common history, our common memory, and it's a cultural heritage that everyone, irrespective of their background, can share, relate, and be a part of. Well, how do we make accessible what is invisible below the surface? Dive parks is one example of that. Dive parks, I think, is one exciting way of making both natural and cultural heritage accessible. These are places that are created to both for free divers and for snorkelers who can visit original sites and under controlled circumstances can go below the surface and have a first-hand experience of the heritage beneath the surface, whether it is sunken ships, whether it's marine biology, or even deliberately sunken airplanes and art. They are becoming more and more common around the globe, and they are also, I think, increasingly linked to issues relating to regional and local development in adding value to the tourism industry, for instance. But for all of us who do not dive, how can we connect to the heritage that is below the surface, that we cannot, we should not, and we will not bring up to the surface? Well, what you see on the image is our latest museum in Stockholm, the Vrak, Museum of Wrecks. Our newest museum is opened in September last year, not even 6 months ago. And the idea behind this museum is not to bring more wrecks to the surface, but to bring you as a visitor down to the bottom of the ocean to experience the heritage without scuba gear, of course. And this is done, of course, by the latest visual technology, creating an immersive experience, like we show in the picture. Obviously, we also exhibit original objects, and we provide a lot of contextual information in relation to these installations. I would just like to finish off by highlighting the importance of civil society when it comes to preserving and disseminating the maritime heritage and to engage a wider audience. Because all around Europe, there are thousands of associations and individuals that spend so much time and effort in preserving, restoring, reconstructing, and disseminating and sharing maritime heritage in different forms and shapes. There is a Swedish word for individuals like this, committing their energy, their time, obviously for their personal fulfillment, but also for a greater good. And it translates directly into English as fire souls. Their souls are on fire. They're burning passionately for the maritime heritage. And I think we owe these people a great deal. And I think it's vital that we as professionals, as well as governments, keep on encouraging them in their important work. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much indeed.
Au feu de la mer.
Well, after the fire souls, we can now move on to lighthouses. So you work to upgrade and enhance maritime heritage. Perhaps could you tell us a little bit about the perimeter of your action and also talk about the specific characteristics of it, because it's one which is habitual, but it's also something that you can visit, this heritage. I mean, it's something which is used in everyday life and so on, but also part of this. Well, lighthouses, as we know, these are objects which enable sailors to know where they can dock. So, now in France, with Cordoran, we've got one which has worked. It's well known in Cordoran. We'll come back to this later, lighthouses. And these works have gradually evolved over time with the best technologies available at the time, because there was a crying need for this, because it led us to maintain the object, but also to help it evolve according to the latest technology and also the needs of the navigators. So when we wanted to look a bit further, we raised them. This is what happened with Corcoran. We raised its height, and when we wanted to see it from further away, then we increased the strength of their light. And when we wanted to see it, we wanted to distinguish them. Then we put them into different. We made the differentiation between them. So this can be explained. So we can, as long as the technologies can follow, we are able to do this because, in fact, if you can shine your light further and brighter, this means that you can have very important view of this, but the industry wasn't able at the time to build these this equipment in 1823 or so, and that being the case at the time, 1823, we needed to have people who were thinking in different terms, and so we had Augustin Trenel, who looked just at the useful part of the optics, and this gave us this special kind of lens which made it possible to have the greatest different to be able to have wider beams, and so we were able to have better beams for the lighthouses. Well, this protection in using your work, how do you deal with this question of transmission and also enhancing the equipment? Well, this was always something which was at the heart of people who dealt with lighthouses. Lighthouses are always built to be beautiful as well. And now, of course, several decades, even hundreds of years later, it's now become heritage. It's heritage which has been transmitted from one generation to the next, which has been looked after from one generation to another. I'm talking about the work itself, but also I'm talking about the immaterial heritage with the technological developments and so on. So now we've got lighthouses which are built with LED beams. Now, if I look at a 6,000-watt lamp, it was about that size, and now we've got 250 watts, which is just tiny, like I'm showing, a couple of centimeters long. Well, this is very important to show to the people who come to visit them. Do you have specific actions to show them about this lighthouse? Well, since the 90s, and associated to this development, to this technological development, there was a moment when we were able to automate these lighthouses and to be able to control them from afar, remotely. In other words, that meant that you had to have lighthouse keepers there. You didn't have to have it from that time long. So we had to bring back the old lighthouse keepers to Earth, and we used them to help them with navigation. It helped them as well because they were living there, and we were able to think a different future for these lighthouses. In other words, we had some buildings which we realized that they were very, very important heritage. Some people recognize them as being monuments to be protected, national monuments, and there was room as well. So in the 90s, we started to say, well, what we should be doing is should make them available to the public at large. And that was how we started to start this sharing of this heritage, which means we had norms which had to be respected, standards, in order to be able to open them up to the public, which meant that we were able to organize things in such a way as to these buildings would continue to be able to continue operating without any risk of being affected by the visits of people, and also to enable the largest number of people to accede to it, to get in, to have a look at it, and also develop this as well, because they mark our coasts. They are markers for our coasts. And we're thinking about cultural, touristic activity. Other things develop as well, and other actions develop. So this was the way in which we started to think, and now we've got 40 to 50 lighthouses which are open. Sometimes they're only open in the tourist season. Sometimes they're open all year round. with quite a large number of visitors per year. So
des baleines, par exemple,
the phare des baleines, for example,
sur l'île de Ré,
on the island of Ré, the Île de Ré, it has about 1 million visitors. And in its museums, well, museum isn't really right. They're kind of centers of interpretation. They're not really museums, but in we've got 250,000 visitors in the actual working part of the
on peut se dire
lighthouse. Now, in Corcoran, we can also say that you can't have an open sea lighthouse available to the public at large. You know, if it's right in the high seas, you can't do this. Well, people came along to say, yes, actually, why not? It is feasible. It isn't impossible. And Corcoran, between October and, let's say, April, because if it's too rough, we can't have people, but there's 25,000 visitors come. That's the maximum that we can have between April and October in these two high seasons, as it were. We'll stick to that number as well. So apart from that, the number of buildings you're responsible for is quite high, isn't it? So why don't could you tell us, how do you work internationally? Because I think of the International Association of Lighthouses and Signals at Sea. Well, I mean, that is a shared heritage, isn't it, as well? Yes, well, there was the Man Démarche International, we recognize this. First of all, functionality. So the International Association of Maritime Signaling was set up to be able to share international rules and to have the same system of signaling so that it would be used throughout, across the whole planet from one navigator going to another area, so that they wouldn't be, as it were, lost at sea. And so there is now a name. We said, well, we've got to go beyond this. So beyond that, there is a working group, organized a working group on the engineering and various subjects. And we said, well, we need to set up a working party, an international one, in the AISM on this heritage. So we've got people coming from different countries. They get together twice a year. And this working party decided at the beginning to set out international meeting days on navigation and to start out to spotlight one particular lighthouse per year. In 2019 was the first one, and Corcoran was chosen because of its international beauty, the Cordouan. Of course. Thank you very much. So I know that you all have a lot to say, quite a lot to say about this, but I suggest that we move on to Mr. Donnelly. So he was the founder and the past president of the association Hermione Lafayette, and who'll tell us about this. So you'll tell us about this because this heritage goes well beyond what a national situation. And we were talking about this, which was linked to the Royal Cord. Can you tell us a few words about this, your past history, please?
Oui, bonjour. Désolé de ne pas être avec vous, mais
yes.
Mon épouse a été.
I'm sorry not to be able with you, but my wife had to undergo some surgery, and I have to be with her. One cannot understand the Hermione if one does not refer back to the historical context, and that is an heritage that was destroyed in 1941 by the German aviation, since at that time the Royal Cord manufacturing facility was destroyed, and the ambitious municipality of Royan understood the potential of this facility from the 60s.
la corderie,
the Corderie Royale, the rope-making factory, which took 12 years till 1984, from 1972 to 1984. It was really an iconic rope factory in the era of Louis XIV. So at the beginning of the 1980s, when the Royal Rope Factory and this rebuilding was done, I could see the master craftsman building the stones of the rope factory, and I asked them what has been planned to pass on the legacy, the heritage of this rope factory, and the municipality had not planned anything at the time. So, but look at that ship, really. They wanted really to pass on this to other institutions, including the municipal library, but nothing was planned really to promote the actual legacy, what it meant for the people of their time, of Louis XIV, and to pass it on to the people of today, really. So we wanted to provide the people with an explanation, and we call this now Center of Cultural Education, which aims at facilitating the understanding and the dialogue pertaining to this rope factory, and that was in the beginning of the 1980s. That's how it all started. So really it was a bit difficult from the administrative point of view. I'm talking about the Hermione, that frigate. You worked a lot on the sources, the available sources. The work you have done has enabled to preserve the historical documents. Yes, the International Center for the Sea was launched in 1985, and that was a success. And we thought at the time there was something lacking, actually. And so we had a dream, so to speak, and an adventure for us. Something iconic was missing, and what we came up with as an idea was the rebuilding of that frigate, the Hermione, that was living in the 17th century. But also it was iconic for its international dimension. I've heard lots of things being said about the international dimension of the maritime heritage, and that frigate, of course, used by Lafayette, who is famous in the United States, meant something not only for us, but also for the people in the US and in England. So, thanks to our English friends who had captured a sister ship, La Concorde, English people in Greenwich allowed us to use the master plan of La Concorde. And thanks to this master plan of La Concorde, we were able to rebuild the Hermione. We worked with some Swedish partners, with some Portuguese partners. We shortlisted the different companies. We had only a few craftsmen or SMEs who could actually work on this. France had only kept very few skilled people who could do that work. Nothing was preserved, so that's why we had, so to speak, to rebuild everything, because we kept very few skilled people and elements. So we wanted really to be faithful and truthful to the original ship. So, in order to put this into context, the link with the public bodies and the decision makers and policy makers, that's something we discussed previously a bit. The success of the rebuilding of the Hermione frigate is also the success of the stakeholders in the communities, both Yes, that's right. It is true, both at the local level, with the municipalities, the local administrative bodies, because the Hermione is a strong, of course, local asset. And nothing had been done without a strong political will. But we wanted to propose decision makers with a robust project. But I want to insist really on second level that has already been mentioned, and that is a national dimension. As a sentence, a saying by a writer I admire, Simon Lex, who wrote in his introduction to the ontology of the sea in the French literature, unlike England, whose language and civilization are strongly linked to the sea, France, whose maritime adventures were nevertheless quite admirable, has not succeeded in incorporating its memories in its culture. So that was our motto, really, our goal. The maritime heritage we mentioned previously is an element of our national history which is underestimated, or which had been underestimated and under-promoted. So the fact that we not only wanted to rebuild a replica of the ship, but we wanted also to do a similar journey of that of Lafayette. So we really wanted to make a success of the American journey. Well, that took us 15 years to work with our US partners, to do some networking with the people on the other side of the Atlantic, and to create strong links with our US partners. And the fact that this journey was successful is that it was part of our DNA. So we put a lot of efforts into the very building of this partnership and this linking and intertwining between different communities. Okay, let's conclude about this partnership of international partnership. Sorry, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your different speeches and presentation. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for presenting and providing us with fruitful exchanges and dialogues, which can hopefully erase the frontier that exists between the natural heritage, or maybe the mitigation of those frontiers that exist in both cultural and maritime heritages, and as the Minister of the sea for the French Polynesia said, ocean must be the place where those two heritage meet and are a reality.
Merci à tous. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Vincent, for this roundtable. So taking care of our maritime heritage. So this notion of usage and sharing that you mentioned will be discussed further and deepened by next speakers. So that is the topic of the next roundtable. So I'm inviting Peter Killop, Director of ECOM, and who will be moderating our roundtable. So Peter, thank you for joining us, and Peter Rogers and my friend Robert Donzal, who is with us remotely. And inviting you to discover this promotion done by the Explorers, so a short video done thanks to videos and still pictures done by the National Maritime Museum of France.
I'm there. Hello, good afternoon. Bonjour. Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, thank you for staying with us for this round table highlighting the treasures of maritime heritage. And welcome with me two of our speakers on the podium. The third one will be online with us. Paddy Rogers, the director of the Royal Museums in Greenwich. Robert Domsal, who is online. For the time being, you just see his photo. And Vincent Compredon, I think I don't have to present you here, carrying oaths to Athens, I think. And we would like to speak about, and maybe myself, Director General of the International Council of Museums, the only and the global association of museum professionals and museums with about 45,000 members in 140 countries around the world, almost as many countries as the United Nations. Representing the museum community, which is very diverse, I must say, between, of course, Asia, Africa, and Europe. And we would like to speak about how we present maritime heritage, how to communicate about it now and in the future to raise awareness for this heritage. The term was, you brought it up this morning. How to show you its value and how to inspire responsibility, and maybe we can come back to these points in the course of our dialogue. In the past 2 years, museums, societies as a whole, but museums have faced the challenges of the COVID pandemic because of the health situation and of course and the restrictions which came with it, but even more so the effects of this pandemic, which meant the loss of visitors, closures of museums, and the loss of income. As an association, we have run 3 surveys until now to know more about the situation of museums in the world. And in the first lockdown, I can tell you almost all museums around the world were closed. The situation looked quite bad. We expected 13–15% of the museums around the world to close permanently. This figure is going down now, so the situation seems to brighten up a bit, let's say, to get better. Nevertheless, there are challenges, and our surveys show these are challenges which were there before and which have been accelerated by the pandemic. Of course, the digitization of everything what we do. And of course, this had an effect, and maybe you can speak about how you include this in your presentations, because a museum is very much about the experience on a ship, if it's in a museum, or in the museum itself, and about the object. And online, this is very different from the on-site experience. Globalization is, of course, a challenge. It was mentioned before by Matthew Tanner and others. Climate change and sustainability as well. And the museums have, of course, to raise funds to continue to fund their activities if they lost income. They have to reach out to the public again, or maybe to other publics, different publics. This is something we should speak about today and show. I think personally, they have to show their value, their value for society, by making what they have, what they show, accessible, inclusive, and of course sustainable, not only in the ecological but also in the social and the economic sense. You know that sustainability has these 3 aspects according to the general definition. And I think our speakers today can present some ideas, innovative ideas about all these aspects. And I would like to start with Paddy Rogers, to look first at globalization and sustainability. You had recently an exhibition about life at sea in your museum. Maybe to start with, you can also present your museums to give us an idea of the heritage you present, so that we get a view also of the 3 different museums you represent today.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your introduction, and thank you very much for having me here, Vincent. It was a real pleasure, and I hope that I can at least keep everybody awake as we get through a long afternoon, and it's always difficult, isn't it? There are three things that a museum must do. You must connect, you must connect, and you must connect. Because it's really in that connection with our collections, with our audiences, and with our heritage that we can really be impactful. I want to talk to you a little bit about the museum, but before I get to the museum, I'm going to start at the beginning, as it were, because one of the parts of the museum at Greenwich includes the Royal Observatory. I'll come to why they're connected later on, but we have the Royal Observatory as part of our collection, and it includes astronomy and astrophysics as part of the area of learning. When our astronomers want to talk about the question they're asked nearly every day, which is there life in the universe? They say, well, the technique that we look for life in the universe is we look for a solar system, somewhere like ours, and we look for the habitable zone. What's the habitable zone? Well, the habitable zone is close enough to the star not to be too cold, and far away enough from the star not to be too hot. In our solar system, 3 planets are in the habitable zone. Venus, which has an atmosphere of greenhouse gases and is actually hotter than Mercury. Mars, with no magnetosphere, holding no atmosphere, is actually colder than can naturally support life. And the Goldilocks planet, I'm sure you know the story of Goldilocks, where the porridge was not too hot and not too cold. Earth is the Goldilocks planet. So this is fantastic, there's life on Earth. But much more than that. The Earth would normally have a very hot equator where life could be warm but difficult, and poles too cold to support life because the sun does not strike them with the rays evenly. They're much denser at the equator and much less dense at the poles. But Earth is lucky yet again that it has the ocean. 65% of the planet is covered by a fluid that transmits heat. And as a result of that, the habitable zone on Earth moves far outside the tropics into air. Virtually the whole planet becomes habitable because of the ocean. And the ocean distributes the heat by movement. And as the oceans move to distribute heat, they distribute animals, fish. They create weather. Eventually they were to distribute human beings. And human beings learned how to manage those currents that were created by the movement of water by building craft, initially that sailed on the currents, and then as technology advanced, they learned how to manage the currents and to work with the wind and to work with the water. And this is how human beings spread as the rest of life spread on Earth. The ocean is integral to our habitability, it's integral to our culture, it's integral to our existence, it's integral to our distribution, and of course it's integral to all of those things continuing right now, today. But we forget. We forget because we don't live very near it anymore. Today, if I asked any one of you to stand up and to start taking your clothes off one by one and telling me how they came to France or to your country where you bought them, it wouldn't be long before you were naked and 90% were in the pile that said came by sea. Shipping is still distributing 90% of the goods around the world, and how many people know that? How many people are taught that? How many people make that connection? One of the other items we have, apart from the observatory in the in our museum, in the National Maritime Museum, is the Cutty Sark. The Cutty Sark is a disaster of a ship economically. This was a piece of bad luck from a ship owner who had been very lucky all his life, is that they keep rolling the dice, the ship owners, and eventually he built himself a wonderful clipper, which had the misfortune to be delivered at the same time as the Suez Canal was opened. But at the time that that ship was built, we had globalized trade at a very low level, with virtually no impact on the planet systemically. Yes, we were polluting, but we weren't affecting ocean or weather systems from pollution. So what happened? Well, the Suez Canal opened. I don't know who was responsible for that. But we started then to see the distribution of coal east of Suez and the real sustainability of the steamer. Steamers had been used for localized voyages, and they were more reliable than wind systems. Wind systems, of course, suffer from intermittency. Sometimes the wind blows and sometimes it doesn't. So there's always a problem with managing the wind. So as we started to use hydrocarbons, we started an era of massive globalization. Reliable, cheap fuels, and the reason they were so cheap is because we did not count the destruction done through pollution to the global commons, to the things that we had and shared in common, the oceans and the atmosphere. And it's only now that we realize the impact that we're having. And as we started to have those ships going into these cheap carbon destructive trades, the ships lost beauty. They stopped being aesthetically wonderful. Why? Because nobody cared. When you work with the wind and you work with the sea, you have to build something that's almost organic, because you have to understand the water and you have to understand the system and you have to be close to it. It's why the Cutty Sark is beautiful. But anyone who's seen a 24,000 TEU container ship can tell you that's not beautiful. Why? It's the arrogance of the will. It's the arrogance of man, that bigger is better and you can punch your way through the ocean regardless of the forces, because no one is counting the cost of the fuel. And so we build these ugly systems of transport. But those ugly systems of transport, as they get bigger and bigger, they took the ships further and further away from humans. Now the ships no longer come into Greenwich to anchor in the river, to see the time ball drop, to tell them what time of day it is, to set their watches in order to navigate. They can't. They can't come to Tilbury. Most of them now can only go to Felixstowe or to Rotterdam. Maybe here they go to Le Havre. I mean, there are very few places. And these big ships go further and further away, and our seafarers go further and further away, and they drop from the public consciousness, and we lose our connection. And then our visitors think seafaring is something of 100 years ago. They don't know that it's a life today. And this was really the ambition that we had when we introduced an exhibition called Exposure Lives at Sea at the museum during the COVID lockdown. It was a photographic exhibition because it was easier to assemble, but we used 6 photographers who worked professionally, but at the same time were professional photographers. One of them worked on trawlers in Alaska. One of them had worked on bulk carriers and was an engineer, a Romanian engineer. One of them worked in Arctic stations. Another one was a diver, a woman who worked with biological science in California. And we created some images of the way that the ocean is and the way that people live at sea. And we used it to host a conference, not just with other museums, but with the maritime professional industry, the International Chamber of Shipping, to ask questions about these very issues. How do we bring consciousness? What's the nature of well-being in shipping for seafarers? What is it like to be isolated? What impact has COVID had on a seafarer? Many of the seafarers on these huge ships would do a 6-month working period. Can you imagine? For 6 months, you work non-stop every single day. And then COVID comes along, and you can't get off, and your relief can't get on. And you can't go on holiday, and you can't have a day off. So you have to do another term. The longest I heard of was 430 days at sea, working every day. You can imagine, suicide rates go up, people at home can no longer afford to live because they're not being paid anymore. And so we tried to bring all these things together in a conference and discuss them, and to put them in the context of what had life been like on the Cutty Sark, what had life been like on other ships. So to make the connections all the time, because it's now the past informs, the past has created our present and informs our future. And if we can keep this continuity of understanding ourselves, then trust me, the visitors are going to be very excited, and they're going to understand the importance of their heritage and of their culture.
Thank you very much for this excellent example of an exhibition about sustainability and also about globalization, because the crews on these ships, they are from the Philippines or other countries and traveling in Europe and all around the world. very good to show these aspects of sustainability and globalization of what we do in a maritime museum. I would turn to Robert Domzal, who has joined us now on the screen, director of the Maritime Museum of Poland in Gdansk. And I would ask you as well, maybe to say a few words about their museum, and then about one aspect, very interesting projects you had to make maritime heritage accessible for disabled persons, and also to make underwater heritage accessible. Please, Robert.
I hope we can see and hear each other.
We can see you, yes, and we hear you.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be with you and to take part in the meeting and round table. I'm leading one of the biggest museums in Europe. It's the National Maritime Museum in Gdańsk. We have 10 branches, employ 250 people, and run several museum vessels. Among our branches, we have 2 big museum vessels. Steamer Soldeg, built as the first seagoing vessel after the Second World War in Gdańsk. We also have a big frigate, Dar Pomorza, which is based in Gdynia. But here on the left, you see the building of the medieval crane. This great crane is also the branch of our museum with the exhibitions telling about maritime history of Gdańsk as a harbor in Europe. I must say that all 3 mentioned objects are very difficult and hardly accessible for the handicapped people. We are daily struggling with the challenge how to make our objects accessible for the people with disabilities. All 2 vessels that you see now, and also the great crane, originally were, of course, not supposed to be the museum objects. They were active ships, seagoing vessels, and somehow accidentally it turned out that they are the museum objects now. What we developed and what we are working on is to how make them accessible for the people with disabilities, how to present the interior of the vessels for the visitors. Sometimes because of the high water, because of the weather conditions, it's pretty difficult to get on board, even for the young people, not mentioning the people with disabilities. So the photo here is presenting the very unique film. We call it interactive spheric film, which is based on the Oculus glasses, which you see on the photo. And we propose for the visitors who cannot go inside of the museum vessel to put the Oculus and to make interactive tour, not only on board of the vessel, but also beneath, to go to the loads, to go to the engine room, to go to the different places which are daily very hard to visit. So that's why I'm just trying to put our effort to make such a kind of interactive ways of visiting more and more popular. So not only in my opinion, but also in the opinion of many museums which are suffering from the pandemic time, such a kind of interactive online ways of visiting museums are pretty important for us. Another field of our activity that I would like to mention is underwater archaeology. And again, our museum is working since 50 years on the protection, documentation, and education connected to the underwater sites, mostly shipwrecks, which are lying in our Gdańsk Bay and in the Baltic Sea in general. 5 decades ago, we used different methods of documenting shipwrecks. Nowadays, we are working with the digital cameras. We are making the photogrammetric models of the vessels, which could be seen by the people who are not diving, who cannot go beneath the sea surface. In 2015, we opened a kind of virtual wreck museum where we are making available many shipwreck models, which could be zoomed, which could be seen as 3D video movies. Right now we have over 20 shipwrecks documented like this and presented in the same way, accessible for the people who usually are not going to go under the water. So such cases, I think, are presenting the demands which we are going to see probably more and more often in the whole museum world. I mean, how to work online with the audience, how to work with the audience with special demands, with the society which is getting older, unless all over Europe. So people who cannot visit, as I mentioned, the interior of the museum vessels. Because of the pandemic period, such a kind of challenges were even more visible. Our museum and many other institutions like our had to move a lot of activities into the internet sphere. I would like to mention the online education, which were pretty hard experience for us. Of course, because of thousands of hundreds of students had to spend many hours daily in the front of the computers, making or doing their daily lessons. So how to convince them to spend 1 more hour a week or some more time to sacrifice for getting in touch to the museum educators. Of course, we are not going to solve all the problems. We are just looking for the new ways of communication with the society, communication with the younger audience, with the people with some special demands. And the example that I gave, just the top of the iceberg, of course, but I would like to share with you some of the experiences that we just had. And in my opinion, we just need to develop such a kind of ways of communication. So I hope you can find time to visit our website and to see this virtual wreck museum yourself, and also to see the devices that we offer to see the museum vessels, which I mentioned. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Robert. I don't know if you heard the applause from the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Please stay with us. I would pass now the word to Vincent Campredon, but I would like to have maybe a final round or ask a question to all of you in the end. But before that, I would like to ask you about the project of your museum, the refurbishment that is planned, that should open, the museum that should open next year. How do you address the audience? And we had the example of the disabled persons. I don't know if you want to take one specific example of maybe a new audience or a younger audience. Please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Merci, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Speak in French, I'm sorry.
I'm going to speak French. So, thank you very much for proposing this subject. So I'd like to start by connect. You start with connect. I'm going to start with communicate. Communicate. Why communicate or connect? Well, firstly, it's part of my experience, and also because France has developed, of course, a new kind of museum model. We found it faced with a major question. I mean, how can we transmit and convince of the importance of the sea, the taste of the sea, the awareness of how important the seas are? Well, for France, it was a small revolution, as it's a national marine museum. And coming back to Matthew, which is different from France, between maritime and marine, we were talking about that because in France, marine is the armies, it's the navies, of course. We've got different kind of navies. It's not the same thing. And maritime is more broadly all those kind of questions. So the challenge we had to face, and which was imposed upon us with the team here as well, was to transform a museum that is the National Naval Museum under 1848 Louis XV to make it into a museum open to the future. So how could we do this? And that's where I'm going to answer your question, Peter. How do we set about that? That is a museum which was always an amazing naval museum, National Naval Museum, and how to replace it, this museum about the history of the past, and to make it into a museum of the future. This was really the question, the problem, as a kind of dilemma. It was very complicated from that. So we were able to invent, but I'd just like to repeat what I was saying at the beginning of this afternoon, that is to have a museum about the future, which also convinces and transmits. Just let me give you some basic examples. Unfortunately, we can't go further. So it was, first of all, open up. Communication is open. You understand our scientific culture on the sea, and no longer just the Navy, the National Navy. I mean, don't let's forget it, of course. It's very present, the Navy, in the museum, but we see more important questions such as ecology for French. They're very interested in ecological matters, economic, scientific, military and strategic questions as well. So we're not just talking about the Navy, but we're talking about everything and its importance. And the second fundamental point, another form of opening, that is opening up to the public at large, because the Navy Museum had a traditional museum of kind of people who liked, you know, the Navy. Their grandfather coming along with his grandchildren and say, look, come have a look. I'm going to show you these beautiful pictures of the sea.
C'est de transmettre et convaincre pour tous les publics, à tous.
We wanted to do this. We wanted to attract the public at large, particularly young generations. Often, after all, they are the future. We had to speak to them and address them. And when I say this, we shouldn't forget people who like them, the amateurs, people who might know one aspect of the sea. I mean, they go to the beach, or perhaps beach activities. We've got to address them too, of course. We've got to speak to the younger people. We've got to speak to families. We've got to address them. We've got to speak to those who've never heard talk of the sea as well. We have to talk to, as we say, we've got to say people as well who never go to museums at all, you know, the non-museum goers. And we wanted to have a museum for all, and that is a big change. And the second point, I was talking about transmission. Transmission, we were talking about, yes, of course, we want to transmit the awareness of the importance of all these points for the museums, but as well in terms of communication, we want also to transmit a message. We want to transmit this message, the message being the sea is the future of humanity. But this message has got to be simple and it's got to be hammered home several times. You've got to repeat it over and over again. For us, you open up for the sea, you open up to the public at large, you transmit a message. But to do all of this, it's not all that easy. It's 250 years old. You've got to have some kind of dynamic behind it because we've been working, we're in the 7th year of our transformation. In other words, we've been working on it for 6 years already. We understood that this is a museum of the past. We're being asked now to talk about the future. Well, in terms of communication, we're not just talking about before and after, we're talking about today, what's happening now. So we have created a dynamic between the past, the present, and the future. In other words, a flow which I think really feeds all the choices and discussions. I have a sentence that I really like it, which is, the past gives its depth to the present, which sheds light on the future. So this was said, it's going to be opened at the end of next year. That is on the basis of the past, open to the present and open to the future. Well, that isn't all. We've also got some museum professionals in a kind of transformation which invented museography, that is architecture. It's going to be very new in museography terms. And inertia. I believe this was mentioned at the beginning of this. Sorry, it's immersion. I'm sorry, immersion. Many pictures, a lot of pictures, very essential today. And we said we're going to be looking at more and more pictures. 360 degrees pictures, and this is Casino Strook. Well, this is going to be a huge wave, a wave. We want the visitor to be covered, to be submerged in this wave, and we want to see the energy which you feel, the energy which you get when you are in the middle of a wave. Now, in addition to visiography, we've got programming. We want to have cultural programming which will be open to the subjects which all public might be interested in, particularly the young. I mean, not just history, so subjects to do with the challenges of the sea of today and tomorrow. So these are the subjects which are kind of topical subjects, which are concerned to the young generations. To attract them, we can say, well, yes, something's happening in the museum on new subjects, and which are topical subjects where they feel that they're concerned. As I said, ecology isn't just that, but ecology is a subject which brings the people along to the museum. It brings them into the museum. So there we can show them perhaps slightly different challenges and slightly different concepts to do with the sea. And this visiography, as I'm calling it, is open, and this can be done by exhibitions for the public at large. We're developing a public, which is called Sport. So digital games. So through this digital sport, we're able to get young people in, to get them to play using digital games about the sea. And so part of this can be, they can be brought in different themes, different subjects through games, online games, and there'll also be workshops and initiatives in which people can participate, and also involvement of societies, institutions, communities. I'm thinking about the influencers. I'm thinking about the ambassadors we created, the clubs of ambassadors for the maritime environment. That is, to get out and get in touch with the largest number of people possible, because a museum is 6 museums. We're in Brest here, but the Naval Museum is 6 museums, but so that a visitor doesn't know anything much about it. Says, oh yes, I have understood the importance of the ocean, and of course to protecting oceans. Just one last word, perhaps, I know. We're also thinking, because you're asking about how to get in touch with the younger generations, how to reach out to them, and how can we get into this new environment? The Minister of Polynesia was telling us about the way in which we kind of reach out to young people today. It's essential is to move into the virtual world. But we mustn't let this change of the world as to how can we reach out and how can we move from this virtual world to a natural world, because we know that among the thinkers and the metaverse, as we call it, that later on the real world and the virtual world will come together, will unite. I don't know if we got that far, but this is what we'd like to try to do. We'd like to try to get the young people away from their virtual world to see the origins and to see the real world. So this is a revolution, a very deep-ranging transformation and change, which we hope, and of course we'd love to invite you along at the end of next year to see whether in fact we've reached out to you. Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. And I think that we look forward to this inauguration of the museum into English now.
I had prepared for the last round was about communication. You as well as Robert, you spoke about communication, and I wanted to ask about the message in this communication. You said it's la mer est la future de l'humanité. And I would like to come back maybe to the point where we started to sum up a bit our discussions and ask about, again, about the responsibility, the social value of maritime museums, the responsibility of these museums for the maritime heritage, but as well for the society in which they are embedded, to which they show their heritage. If you could, maybe one of you or two, I don't know, Robert, if he's still connected, say in how far you try to raise awareness for this responsibility, to inspire it and assume it. Please.
Maybe I could just touch on something that's been on my mind recently, and that I think goes to this idea of how we communicate and how we try to penetrate. Because I think the museum, okay, it's a house of memory. It's a place where you embed your values, where you know who you are by knowing your construct of the past. I mean, any psychologist or any human being can imagine, and any psychologist can tell you that if you didn't have a knowledge of what you just did, or you did the day before, or you did last year, or where you were born, what would you be? What would consciousness be? What would it mean to be a human being if you knew neither hope nor despair because you had no knowledge of what happened yesterday? And in a way, the museum as a house of memory is holding this for the public. And if we're holding this for the public, then we have to be careful about what we choose to hold. Because we know how difficult memory is. You only have to think of some of the people who need treatment for post-traumatic stress as a result of violent events to know that it's important how you embed a memory, how you understand it, so that you can share it in a way that supports good values, supports good decision-making, and binds people together, not splits them apart. And so we have a very, very important role to play. It's no longer the role of the super professor who is the holder and gatekeeper of all knowledge. It's no longer the attractions organizer of the commercial world of museums where it is enough to have fun. Somewhere we need to keep the expertise, we need to make sure people have fun, but we also need engagement, that makes people understand themselves, understand how they got here, and what it means to be in that museum at that time looking at those things and why they should come. Now, I tiptoe around that a little bit because it is a hot topic in Britain. It is a very hot topic, and I can be censured by my government if I say the wrong things now. This is where we've come to. And yet Britain, in a maritime museum, I hold a collection which reflects a maritime empire which captured the records, the images, and the artifacts from disappearing tribes and emerging nations, and which is probably one of the best resources to understand what it means to be British in the 21st century. Because you can be black and British, you can be Chinese and British, you can be a Muslim and British. And if I don't engage in this way in understanding that we will change the meaning of being British, but we need to still retain values that will allow you to make fun of us for eating roast beef or for playing cricket. So how do we embed all these things in a way that gives people a chance to find themselves, to know their status and their importance? Because the history we told in 1930 when the museum was started was very clear. Of all the nations, the best were the British. To be born British was to win the lottery in life's great chances. That the British were better at sea than anybody else, and that the museum was to embed these values in the schoolboy public. And clearly that's not the museum we are today. We've been on a journey, we have a journey to continue, but we have to be ready to fight these challenges and fight for these values to understand really who we are.
Thank you for that. I think these were almost final words, and I'm told I may not pass the word to anybody else because we have to end the session. But I would like to, in the end, to quote again the speech of the minister this morning from Polynesia, because I think this expression you used, océaniser la conscience, it's very much this. Thank you very much for staying with us, although it's a long afternoon. There is still another session, so stay with them. And thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Peter. I'm a little frustrated not to answer on the responsibility, but I'm happy that my friend answered. Thank you very much. So I speak French now. Thank you. Merci, pardon, Peter.
So thank you, Peter.
On est au cœur de l'enjeu de la mise en valeur.
So we are at the heart of the promotion in the sharing of this heritage for the future and new generation. How can we be inspired for the new usage? So as to pass on the torch, really, that is what is at stake during the next roundtable. Laurent Castagny will be the next speaker and moderator, along with Robert Calcagnan from Monaco, Olivier Chabaudot, and Joa Falcato, who I'd like to thank already warmly for taking part into this roundtable.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon. The new generation worldwide, both private and public, will put us in front of our responsibility so as to share common preserved heritage, so as to pass on the torch, as said the minister. We must renew the way, we must promote this and raise the awareness for this heritage. The time to look down, to have a look-down approach where specialists provides its audience, the passes audience with his thought and insight is now over. So thanks to the new usage, the recipients and the audiences now are the heart of the thoughts in an ever-changing world, and well, the image is prevailing. How can we actually seize the interest of the new audiences and respond to the desires of commitment and nourish their imagination? Things have changed, the wind has changed, and therefore the different stakeholders must share and promote histories and the heritage and legacy differently, and different initiatives are flourishing so as to provide and further an inclusive approach, proposing high-tech but also low-tech approaches that will lead to the engagement of the people. That is the case of the immersive Rochelle exhibition, which has been launched recently, so has to promote the heritage and to raise the awareness of the citizens. But we also want to involve the different writers, such as David Volk, the photographer, and Mr. Wolf, who works one with the Ifremer and one with the Oceanopolis. And you can see their work here at the Capucin in Brest. So we can also use escape gates, comics. Of course, books are a great way to share ideas, thoughts and insights. In order to share and think about those challenges, it is my pleasure to be with three guests. João Facado, first of all, who's director of the Ocean Mercado of Lisbon in Portugal, a member also of the Foundation of Haute-Churchill and of the Aquarium, Olivier Chabaudot, who is a producer and founder of The Explorer, whose mission is to provide a list and inventory of both natural and human assets of the planet, which has been awarded an award recently, and it is the biggest dedicated to the inventory of the planet. And then Mr. Canadian, director of the Alpère Premier Museum, celebrating the 100th anniversary of its founder, working also with the Maison de la Mer in Paris. He was also an advisor to different local governments. João Fagadi, you are having 1.4 million visitors per year. What is the most important challenge in terms of education and passing on, really, the information and raising the awareness about all this?
I believe maybe speaking from here, your heads can come a little bit higher and help you not to keep awake. Well, I would say that we all know, probably in this conference, and I'm sure in this room, that oceans today are in not a very good situation. We all know the threats are huge, the situation is not very nice. But if we think, if the general population is aware of that, I think there is a huge gap between reality, between what experts know and what the general population knows. And this huge gap may be a challenge for us. I think it is a challenge. We really need the big population, the people on the street, to be aware of reality. If we are to achieve the changes, the new regulations, we will need to implement today and to implement tomorrow as well. So we really believe in Oceanário and Fundação Oceano Azul that we need to work towards creating a blue generation, a different generation, a generation of people that are aware of many more things that today they don't, relating to the ocean, relating to the heritage and everything that has to do with the sea. How to achieve that is a challenge. And I'm sure all of us have some ideas about it, how to achieve it. But we really already have some very powerful tools in place. I don't have the numbers for the maritime museums, but if we look at the aquariums, I don't have them for the world, but I have them for Europe, 10% of the European population visits one aquarium every year. It's more than 70 million people visiting our institutions every year. And we have their attention for 1.5 to 2 hours. They, on top of it, they believe we are the most trusted source of information about the oceans. Studies say that. So it's very powerful. We can do the difference if we all align the messages that we should share, the changes that we need to promote. On top of that, we also have very powerful educational programs. I don't have general numbers, I only have for our institution, but Oceanário Lisboa in 2019, before COVID, reached in its educational program more than 210,000 children in 1 year. This is, our biggest stadium is 55,000 people, so it's, imagine 3 full football stadiums full of children. That's the amount of children we give classes to every year. With these guys, we can go a lot deeper in the process of teaching them our mission of ocean conservation, of what we need to change. But at the same time, we don't believe this is enough. We always think we need more people coming to us, we need more people to be touched, but the reality is this is a touch and leave experience. What we're doing is very important, but it's inspirational. We touch them and we leave them, and we hope for the best. In 2 years they will be back and I have 2 hours more. You don't change a generation. You don't change a culture like this. Really, on top of content, it's like a football player again, sorry, but I'm from Portugal. You need, on top of content, you need frequency. You really need, if you want to change a culture, if you want to change people's behaviors, to be with them every single day. Or it won't be a cultural thing. It will be an experience. Some people will be inspired and they will change their lives, but most of them won't. So what did we think in relation to achieving this in Fundação Oceano Azul, that now we have a pilot project going on? We created 8 themes going through the curriculum of the first 4 years of classes, from 5 to 8-year-olds. And we created 8 themes that can be incorporated in the curriculum of the school. So you can read through the ocean, you can learn who belongs to the ocean to. We went to the children and we asked them, what do you want to know about the oceans? A big inquiry. And then we created this content that it's very easy to supplement what the teachers have to give in classes. And we didn't go to the children. We went to the teachers and trained them all with amazing materials and with amazing content that can apply and make their own classes much more interesting, including oceans in it. We are now 3 years down the road. The studies we are doing, evaluating the results, are very impressive. And this will probably be a model we will need to expand. Obviously, having ocean in the official curriculum is what we believe could really make the change. And it's not very difficult. If we had something like the European Union giving guidelines on how that could happen to be implemented in schools, it would be so easy to reach everybody very quickly and really make change happen. So this is what we believe, some of the ways we can reach. But again, we have to reach all the different targets that we never reach. Teenagers, it's a completely different challenge. How do you talk with teenagers, how to you always have to think what's their interests. So what we have been trying with teenagers, it's what we call our ocean leaders. So instead of Oceanario going to them, an Oceanario is an aquarium, it's very good for 12, 13 years old. You reach 16, boring. They will come back with the girlfriends or with the wives, but for teenagers, it's very difficult to reach. So who do they listen to? Who are their heroes? We need to have them with us. So who we have now working with us is Joanna Schenker. She was the world bodyboard champion, and we have Kikas, the world surf championship number 10 last year, Portuguese as well. And he's going to the schools for us. If Kikas is speaking to a 16-year-old, it's his idol, talking about his adventure in the ocean, talking about how relevant, how important it is to keep the media, teenagers. All of these need to be touched, and we need to find new ways to try to reach them. I would finish by saying, in Oceanario, we really don't believe today, in the world we live in, we can reach people only through facts and information. It's much more about emotions. It's much more about what I feel, about what makes me change. I don't change normally for information. I change for an emotion. And we really believe as well that it needs to be a positive emotion. I always say, if Martin Luther King had said, I have a nightmare, he would have changed nothing. He changed because he said, I have a dream. So I think we all should have a common dream of creating a blue generation. Each one of us find its own way to try and contribute that. And if we all do that, I think we may risk to have success. Thank you very much.
Merci, Joao.
Thank you. Well, Olivier Chabodeau, with the Explorer, you want to better protect and better promote. We're promoting a high-quality picture. So UNESCO is one of the partners of this platform, and how does it respond to the new usage of the new generations? Thank you very much, Laurence, for asking these questions. We've got a common axis and challenge. We do want to change things and raise awareness so as to protect the planet and the oceans. I'm using another vector, which is the technology of the pictures, moving pictures or still pictures. Everybody's got a smartphone now in their pockets, even for people in South America, in India, in Africa. Everybody's got a smartphone in their pockets. People in Papua New Guinea do have smartphones, even though they're not always connected, but they have it. So I've got, I'm working with private investors, so has to do an inventory, both for the human side of things, but also the cultural heritage side of things. The idea being, we do want to have a digital art of the cultural heritage of our planet. So we've got a digital catalog featuring submarine footage, land footage, and we do meet the local people, the local scientists, who tell us about their nature, their environment. The local people or personalities do tell us about their vision of their nature. We started with French Polynesia, and we traveled from the Marquesia to the south of the Austral Islands. It is amazing that they talk so much better than we do about their nature, their local territory. So we've done that inventory. We continue to do so since the planet is huge, and the ambition for the Explorer by 2030 is to work within 195 countries. So we shall work in the 55 countries of the African Union. So we've developed a platform. Everybody does know now Netflix. It is the most well-known platform. At the time being, we're featuring 17 versions in 17 different languages, and of course with a specific theme dedicated to oceans, which will allow to show to the wider audience the beauty of the nature, the beauty of the heritage that one must know well, so as to protect well the platform. So we've launched that platform that can be actually accessed on everybody's smartphones, TV, or any other digital devices. And the interest of all that is to use on a platform two functions. First of all, you can just watch movies, documentaries of 50 to 40 or 25 minutes, but also to take part in conversations, discussions. And I think that the director of the Museum Maritime Museum of England told us we must connect people and connect artifacts and the heritage to the people. That it is true, everybody on our platform can do that. Set up an account and link to other people, so we can educate the people and the wider audience, whether that is here in Europe but also elsewhere, here in Brittany, of course. And we want to make an inventory of our heritage. Of course, we are living and present on our planet only for a couple of decades, and we shall provide a legacy, a testimony, an heritage for the future generation, thanks to this in particular, as a free messaging systems that people can use to have, fortunately, a fruitful dialogue, whether those people are within the southern or northern hemispheres of the globe. So I'm using the principle that Mr. Calcagno, thanks to the beauty of this world, thanks to an immersive experience, thanks to all that, we raise the awareness of the young people to what is at stake here for our planet. Technology and digital technology is helping us today and allow us to connect and engage with a wider audience at the global level. We would like very much all museums to be free and accessible to all, but one must find an economic rationale. So we want to be as free as possible for the wider audience as possible, because people advertising also need a wide audience so as to sell their ads. So we prefer to ask manufacturers and advertisers to pay so as to have this platform and to make it as free as possible for the users. Of course, you have heard about the metaverse, and we're thinking about this very seriously. We do not want mixed the wheat from the shaft, really, and we are at the very start of this notion. Let me come back to Polynesia, which is great with French Polynesia, and I guess what the minister would like to do. Those of you who do know French Polynesia, well, the young people living there enjoy a great nature, a great natural experience every day. They do not need any virtual experiences because they do live actually in an outstanding environment all the time. So as to conclude, we chose digital technologies to pass on that message, i.e. oceans are great, or huge potential for the future of the next generation. Of course, we work with ships, vessels at sea, but we use digital technologies to raise the awareness to a wider audience. So of course, you're welcome to download our app on your smartphone and become an explorer yourself.
Exactement.
Yes.
Faire aimer, connaître et protéger le
So, knowing, promoting, the oceans and make the oceans become appealing. That is the roadmap of the Oceanographic Museum of Monaco. What are the most relevant programs and objectives for you? I think you're providing the visitors with different experiences, both digital and on-site experiencing. Yes, that is true. Thank you, Joao. Thank you. I think it is very interesting. I've learned a lot by listening to you. I would like to repeat what Mr. Champredon, the General Director of the Maritime Museum, told us previously. The past is clear and provides some depth to the present time, which sheds a light on the future. I think that message is indeed important, and the Oceanographic Museum is less old than the National Museum of the Maritime History. But having said that, we are proud of our 100 years of history, and I would like to talk for 1 minute, if I may, about the past and our history. And I will read this paper. I'm always surprised to read the first paper pertaining to the article of the Oceans Museum founded by the Albert Ier, who was the grandfather of His High Royal Majesty, the Prince of Monaco, and we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of his death. So what is the first article? The Oceanographic Institute objective is to promote and to raise awareness about the oceans and to make sure that everybody is aware of their weaknesses, their fragile nature, and the sustainable use of resources. These are the terms used in a speech that he made during the Academy of Sciences in the United States of America. So this museum was set up in 1910, more than 100 years ago, and he did so to show to the wider public his collections. And he explored areas in the Arctic regions, and he brought back animals conserved in alcohol, preserved in alcohol, and lots of different things, artifacts. And he just wanted to show it to the people. So he just wanted to make an exhibitions, really. And very quickly, we had more than 100,000 visitors. And then the First World War, Second World War came. And the number of visitors decreased during that period of time. But in the 60s, 70s, Commandant, you may have heard of Jacques-Yves Cousteau, and Commandant Jacques-Yves Cousteau realized that people had to dream and people had to be provided with footages, moving pictures and still pictures, of course, of the world under the seas. So really, he brought that life that exists under the seas and on seas to the widest possible audience, thanks to his TV broadcast. And Jacques-Yves Cousteau left the museum and he died, and we used different formula, and we saw that we had less visitors once again. So in 2006 and 2007, the Prince Albert II of Monaco wanted to do better, really. So for a while, we requested Jean-Loup Etienne, who is there with us at the One Ocean Summit, to provide us with his strategic vision. So we listened to Jean-François Sarado, who has just arrived and who known very well Mr. Cousteau, and Prince Albert II asked us to do something about this, to have more visitors, and we looked for the new generation. We wanted other means to communicate, to raise the awareness, to talk to the people. So we used different types of exhibitions, of different ways of showing the objects and our collection. So right now, at the International Festival of the Oceans, is presented Alick and Albert. So you may know who Albert is, but Alix Tipoti is an artist of the Strait of Torres, that's in Australia, between Australia and New Guinea. And we invited Alick Tipoti to present his work, and what is interesting, and that the Prince and myself visited him on the small island of Badou, and there film director made a small movie on the basis of our visit, and that movie is being presented in Tahiti right now. But our visitors want a comprehensive approach, an holistic approach. Something we were not really into was artworks, and we worked on this very soon. We shall have traditional painters from the Northern Sea with people like Howers, Munch. So we invited modern art to enter our Oceanographic Museum in 2010. We wanted to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the museum, and we wanted really to do something different. So we invited Damien Hirst, who is a very well-known and controversial modern artist, to do an exhibition, of course, that led to lots of controversies. What on earth is he there? Why is he coming? But that was actually useful to make the museum appealing once again, because so we continued with that. We had Mark Kwan, Mark Yan, Yang Won Pin. We invited dozens of Chinese artists to express themselves about the collecting of shark fins. So, of course, the consumption of shark fins has been divided by 5. In China, we were not the only one to do something about this, but I guess we had some consequences. So really want to have a holistic, comprehensive approach. Young people want to be involved, so we put in place games in our museum. You can come only to play if you want to play a game. There's a great escape game, so you are trapped into the Goélette Jean-Pierre Premier, the engine breaks down, and then you need to act, you need to find the different solutions as to escape. It is very successful. All this is really successful. So I shall finish by talking about the future. This is more difficult, but I paid a visit to João Falcoa in Lisbon 7 or 8 years ago, and he explained his vision, his program for the young people, but with his authorization, I copied what he had planned and what he did. So since that time, we have developed a program for the young people. We called it Ocean for Youngsters. So, for instance, we use these big immersive rooms. In 600 square meters, you're really in the great coral reef barrier. So, of course, you can see all these fishes. You can interact with different species. Very soon, we shall use the same program to take our visitors into the polar world. And we are We are smaller than the Lisbon Museum. We maybe our area of interest for the people is roughly 1 to 2 million people, so that's less people than in the Lisbon area. Thanks to the digital technologies, we have developed a series of educational tools using digital communication, our Zoom meeting, for instance. And Joa, you said it. Something is very important, and that is that we can go and meet young people, but we do need to have somebody on site. So we are working with the national education network, both in France and in Italy. We're working especially with the Rennes Academy here in Brittany. They help us to identify teachers who want to explain the oceans to their pupils, to their students. Teachers who are interested in taking part, but who do not have the know-how so far. And we can, of course, explain those teachers how to gain this know-how. So we're helping them. So we provide virtual, remote classrooms. We've got staff of the Oceanographic Museum who work with the teachers, who talk to the classroom pupils, both in primary and secondary schools. And we want to have 5 more times pupils or students to attend those classroom sessions. And we want to work at the global level. So we work with young people living in deprived area or poor area who cannot actually visit the Museum of Monaco. So we really want to have a program for all, really. And we are just like you. We do know that these young people suffer from disabilities or poor. We do need to pay our staff as well, so we need to work with foundations such as the Rothschild or Total foundations, which help us to promote and further those educational programs. How can we talk and raise the awareness of the teenagers? They are beginning to be interested about the future. So we are working on the ocean carrier. We've got a forum for the works that can be done at sea. So we are promoting now the digital solutions. We've got people on site working with us. So these few possible pathways for the futures. And I think I've exceeded the time I was allocated. Thank you.
Je vous remercie tous les trois pour
Thank you, 3 of you, for sharing the initiatives, for inventing and reinventing the heritage and making the heritage alive again and again. I'm taking part to the emergence of blue generations thanks to the training of the trainers or the teachers using iconic heroes. Using the beauty of heritage in our smartphones, using the artworks and new practices in our museums. Maybe a last question of the final word for each of you. If you had a wish or a message for a future visitor who has not come yet to the museum of Monaco, what would you say?
La motivation.
Well, I would say from what we hear here and from what we have heard from the past presentations, storytelling is hugely important. We really have to have a story to tell people, and we all have to innovate. If we look at the capacities that are in this room to do things differently and then share what we have done, not only what worked, but most importantly, what did not work for the others not to repeat it, I think it will make our lives and our objectives and our missions much easier to achieve. And I think that's the great opportunity we all have, is to share our experiences and try to be a little bit more knowledgeable by acquiring those. And that would be my final message. Let's share and move together forward.
Alors moi, je suis entièrement d'accord sur le storytelling.
I totally agree about storytelling. I do think people want to be taken away, taken along with something. We've got this exhibition goes through the world, which goes through. People want to have news of an exhibition. What are they doing? Where's the expedition got to? How are they? And all that. And I think that young generations today, they've become aware, perhaps since at a younger age now, I mean, than we are now. I mean, you're younger than I am, but still, never mind. I mean, let's not go into that. But they are the ones who are going to make things move on. And I think they really want to be players in the field. And we said that Escape didn't work at all because people want to be in a tempest, in a storm. They want to be part of the scenario. And I think this young generation is going to speed up things. And we've got to show them the path, but they're going to be the ones that speed along it. Robert, yes, I quite agree with you. I think that the dream, perhaps the dream, this word has been used already. Come along and dream with us. Of course, you have to learn. You've got to be reasonable. You've got to be dispassionate, but enjoy it. Come and talk about Wales with François Sarano. Come along with us to join and come and see the museum.
Some commentaires, moi je rajoute, allez voir Ali Canalbert, je l'ai vu.
Go and see Ali Canalbert, that is well worth it. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much for this third round table. And we're coming round to the fourth one this afternoon. It's the fourth one and the last one this afternoon here. We're going to talk about the reinvention of activities of awareness and education, but also by traditional activities and the joy in those. So these are occasions where they provide an opportunity to share with the seas and oceans and to talk about this very important subject, and last subject, in order to bring together, thanks to the ocean. I'd like to invite Madame Mitra van Ralten to come and join us, video conference. So François Cliandre, who is the mayor of Brest, he's going to join us shortly. And Wolfgang Idiri. I'd like to thank them very warmly for participating in this final roundtable this afternoon. Thank you.
Monsieur le maire, si vous voulez bien venir participer, vous arrivez exactement au bon moment. Merci, c'est absolument parfait.
Right moment. Mayor of Brest, delighted to have you with us.
Très bien, je laisse les derniers mouvements de foule.
Just allow people to come in and settle into the room this afternoon. So this one, we're talking about fédérer, well, to bring together, thanks to the ocean, bringing everyone together. Well, thank you very much for sticking it out and being with us still at this late hour. Well, we know that there are huge challenges for the ocean. We've said this all the time, but this is something which also brings us together to enjoyment, for celebration between people. It was very well done by the Minister of Culture for Polynesia. And our material heritage of the seas, and we haven't talked so much about the heritage which are not just they're not just places and things, but it's also traditions, tales, fairy tales, legends, songs, living presentations, theatre, also very trades and different capacities. I could go a little bit further. There's a whole question of the culture of a people and identity, but this is for another workshop. Today, how can we make use of this non-material cultural heritage to find the enthusiasm which brings us together and which will help us overcome the challenges we have to face? So I have the great pleasure to welcome Madame Mitra van Ralten, who is the director of Sail Amsterdam. Very happy to have you with us. Thank you very much. I've got Wolfgang Idiri, who is the director of Escale in Sète, who's a specialist of songs, of sea songs. And we've got Mr. François Quiandre, who is the mayor of France. I'm so sorry, mayor of Brest, and who organize a maritime festival here. So they will tell us about how the sea brings us together. And in order to understand how this happens at international level, I would also like to turn to Mrs. Mitra van Ralten, because you're responsible for the Amsterdam Foundation, Sail Amsterdam. And could you tell us what the challenges are and how do you overcome to celebrate this meeting every 5 years? And particularly, how do you manage, madam, to get your powerful message across? You've got 2 million visitors every time. Over to you, madam. Mitra.
Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon. Bon après-midi. Je suis enchantée d'être là.
Delighted to be here, but I'm going to be speaking English nonetheless, even though I'm delighted to be with you here. Speak French so well, madam.
Thank you. Since 1975, every 5 years, tall ships come to Amsterdam from all over the globe. For 5 days, Amsterdam is the backdrop for a stunning fleet of tall ships, heritage sailing boats, navy vessels, and modern sail yachts. Sail Amsterdam is like an open-air museum or a pop-up festival of our history books. But sail is so much more. It's about the past, the present, and the future. The visitors long to be part of an extraordinary feeling, to be part in togetherness of something bigger. They can visit the ships, talk to the crew, smell the salt, touch the sails, and imagine the challenges the captain and his crew had to endure. It's about heroism, adventure, and country pride. Sail Amsterdam is about social engagement and cohesion, cultural heritage and celebration. Every day, the Sail Amsterdam Foundation empowers young people to contribute to the development of society and the planet by engaging the relevant topics of talent development, inclusion, and sustainability. Also, the Sail Amsterdam Foundation has embraced the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations to contribute to a better world for all and to contribute for impact on SDG 14, Life Below Water. The edition in 2015 was decorated by 50 beautiful tall ships from 23 different countries. In total, 2.3 million visitors, people visited the various activities. This edition created an economic spin-off of more than 110 million euro. Sail Amsterdam is the largest free public event in the Netherlands and perhaps in the world. Unfortunately, the 2020 edition has been cancelled because of the COVID-19 impact. Preparations are already on the way to make the 10th edition of Sail Amsterdam a tremendous success in 2025. This will happen in close cooperation with the City of Amsterdam, the Port of Amsterdam, the Sail Fleet, the Sail Volunteers, and many more beautiful partners. It will be a Jubilee edition. We will celebrate the 750th anniversary of the City of Amsterdam, and we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of our own Sail. Let me take you to the scope of responsibilities of organizing this event. This includes concept creation and business development, financing, of course, more than 25 million euro operating budget, partnerships, web and brand design, sponsoring, safety, security, crowd control, political debate, network licenses, staffing. We will have like 2,000 volunteers. We do signing of the Sustainable Sail Charter, as we call it, with suppliers and partners, publicity, stakeholder management, entertainment, and so on. But the most important sub-activity we have developed over the last decade is the Sail Academy. We're very proud to announce that this offers young talents with all kinds of backgrounds the possibility to build experience and knowledge before, during, and after the events of Sail. This is realized together with educational institutions and our partners. Already more than 1,800 young talents contributed and participated. So what we say is Sail connects the world not only every 5 years, but 365 days a year. And that's how we engage young people to take care of the planet of the future.
Thank you.
That's what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much indeed.
On est très impatient de venir à la prochaine.
We're very impatient to come along to your next version in 2025. And you see that we've been talking about past, present, future. This is something that's been running through this afternoon's workshops, this afternoon's forums and roundtables. This is something which we've been constantly talking about this afternoon, past, present, future, and bringing them together. Thank you very much, Mr. Berglund. So you are our guest from we're talking about 225, so we're very happy to have you with us this afternoon. Can you perhaps tell us why it's so important to have this festive tradition available all the time, and how can you manage to make it such a success all the time? Thank you very much.
On verra après.
We'll see. We'll see. Can you hear me? Well, thank you very much for telling me. Thank you for welcoming me here. So I am the director of Escale in Sète. So I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. It is very interesting for us. I'm delighted to see so many experts here. And I would like to tell you about an adventure which surprised us. It surprised us. It's called Escale à Sète. We learned to become organizers of a meeting despite ourselves, because when we started this event, we just did not expect this to become so important in the Mediterranean on such a large scale. We were inspired by the Northern Europe maritime fleets. We had a sea song group that I discovered this in Brest in the beginning of the 2000 years. I realized how original they were. Many people came along to participate and stayed on to look in greater detail, and it was organized by seafarers. And when we went back to Sète, we shared this with the fishermen, with people who are part of our ambassadors of our Mediterranean city. And they were a little bit frustrated, but also very motivated, and they wanted to organize something on a Mediterranean scale. In 2010, the first stop in Sète of Escale, we had people from seafarers, sailors and fishermen, and they were the ones who agreed on this, because we were not the only people who wanted to have this wish that they should have an important event to start in the Mediterranean. This was the mayor of Sète, who will speak tomorrow. In the course of speakers, One Ocean Summit in the afternoon. There was also the area, the owners of the port, and we also had the private financiers, private investors as well. So it became an event where many people were involved. So this explains why people were so excited about it. It's also the way in which Sète is the right place for it. Okay, maybe chauvinistic, but I mean, our city was perfectly placed to bring together peoples from the Mediterranean, and it kind of opened their eyes to this, because it is a kind of a peninsula which is near Tours and near the Bassin du Midi. It has people populated by seafarers who've created their identity through immigration from different Mediterranean countries, with people from Italy, Catalan, also North African, particularly with regard to fishing activities and fisheries. This is one of our major activities. And so, in order to organize Escale à Sète, stopover in Steppe, was to use music, non-material heritage. It makes it possible to show the wealth and diversity of seafarer culture. And we realize that when you sing a song in Terre-Neuve or in the north of France, you don't sing it in the same way as the Mediterranean seafarers. So music was very important. And a point that I'd like to come back to is with regard to communication. Now you've got the flyer for Escale à Sète, a stopover in Sète. So we get 300 100,000 people come to this peninsula in a city which only has 45,000 inhabitants. So this, we've never seen it, anything like it. But this, we've got a kind of flyer. People come along, they come along.
Monsieur le maire de Brest, vous partagerez peut-être avec moi cette
you might not share my viewpoint, but these are huge, the high ships, the tall ships, and this was, you can see these tall ships, and so 99% of the visitors come to see the tall ships with the idea of being able to enjoy maritime activities. And then because of the strategy which we can see through our events, it was to use this attraction of numbers, large numbers, and to offer them lots of little messages with workshops as we developed this year. We have free workshops. People learn how to cook the dishes. We learn the history of the seafarers, the dockers. People learn to sing, to build boats, and there's also some fantastic opportunity through these tall ships, which people love to come and look at. They absolutely love to see them. And then people, through this activity, stop over in Sète to be able to see these different traditions for which we have a great respect. And since it's been part of the cultural heritage of UNESCO, we've also got the patronage of the French president as well. And we have 4 founding values: culture, main base of our activities, and we've got the the Navy helping us as well. Second value is solidarity. That is the DNA. We've got a lot of people which shares the view of the seafarers, and then environment, because this is a living world, because seafarers, and particularly fishing families, are involved because the activities and the skill is handed down from one generation to the next. At the moment, they're suffering a little bit, so we're trying to enhance this activity as much as we can, and this is also supported by Ifremer, which is a big institution in France, and also teaching as well, and it is the Academy of Sète, which supports us here. So we've got, it also generates 15 million euros by way of activity. So we hope that it will be able to continue doing it for a long time. Thank you. Thank you. Your enthusiasm is more than communicator, and this leads us on to another subject, which might indeed be the object of a later discussion. We're very happy that you talked about values. This is something which is with well, we're talking about singing, but I think that will you please just sing us a couple of verses of one of your songs, which will be part of the hymn material. Well, in French, when it hasn't got 12, we haven't got 12 verses. Maybe just the last 2. It's called Mours de Port. To me, this is an opportunity to pay tribute to the fishermen and traditional fishing vessels which had Mours du Port, and if you look at the special way in which the boats are built, and this was called Mours du Port. I'm going to give you the end of that song. It was written by a fisherman from Sète who tells us daily life in this, and this was we realized that even a big boat and a small boat.
Alors là, c'est le rêve. Sous le soleil qui plombe sur le port, nous étendons nos filets sur la grève et nous vivons tous en famille à bord. Voilà pourquoi tous les pêcheurs de Sète en sont si fiers de leur petit trésor. Bautres juices din vostras barraquetas, nautres gardem nostre mure de por. Nautres gardem nostre bateu de bio. Merci.
Bon, vous avez compris, tous à 7, c'est en avril. Hein?
Everyone in set, that is to set, April 22. Go to set, then there'll be other areas. Well, we're now leaving the Mediterranean and we're coming back to the Atlantic. You have been celebrating this festival for 30 years. I was there in '92 myself when we were talking about this, so we'd like to talk about it. What does it mean for the soul of Brest? How has this been something which is unmissable for the seafaring community which meets every 4 years and comes and joins you? Well, evening, everyone. I could sing you a song, but I'll leave it till another time. It's a Brest song, Famille de la Bidon. Well, it is a seafaring enabled thing, but maybe I'll leave it till tomorrow evening for our evening meal, perhaps, where I can share it then. Now, how can we talk about these marine festivals in Brest? Victor Hugo, who loved the sea, said, I have more memories than if I were to live 1,000 years. So I don't know where I can understand this question of the marine festivals that we're going to be celebrating than we've been celebrating the last 30 years, as you said. Well, that started in Portsver. That's the other side of on the peninsula of Prestwell, and then the festival started again in Douarnenez. And I remember that I went to Douarnenez in 1988, and this was a fantastic event. It was a magnificent event, and Le Chasse-Marée organizer of this, well, it was too much for them. It was almost too much. They couldn't almost cope. And those responsible for the Chasse-Marée came to see Pierre Marais, who was the mayor of Brest at the time, to say, look, okay, Pierre, come on. You know, we can't handle this. Brest will have to take it on because it's bigger. There's more potential in Brest. We can't manage it in this small place. So Brest will have to take it on board, which is what they did. And they did it together with the National Navy. Have we got any representatives this afternoon? Who is absolutely essential? It's essential that they should be part of these festivals. 1992 was no doubt the first time that many Brest people and beyond that came along. They look at the Pafel, but it is our military river, of course, but except for those who have been in military service, nobody was able to get on it. And so it was a discovery for them, a true discovery. Now, the place where we are now, it was off bounds, off limits, because it was an arsenal, as the Brestois call it. So it was not, nobody could go to it. So you can see there's a few pictures, but it was very important in 1992 because, like in Sète, I'm sure I won't be able to go to Sète between the 12th and 18th because we've got national events here. We've got the national elections, of course, for the presidential elections, but I'll go next time after that.
Fête en mer, bien entendu.
Fête en mer. So, and Fête en terre, a little bit like Sète, I'm familiar with it. And there's a kind of osmosis. I'm looking at the photos, fantastic photos between two marines. So in Brest, we started with the Jeux Grément. And just to tell you, we're going to be celebrating the 30th anniversary this year.
La fête des Vieux Gréments.
La fête des Vieux Gréments, but also the Vieux Charrues, the old plows. And this was set up in reaction for the farmers. Well, because the Navy got going, the farmers want to come along as well, although we've got very good relations, I have to say. But 92, this is what we call now the Vieux Grément. And this year, between the 10th and the 14th of July, there will not only be the 30 years of this, but there's also the Occurrence, which set sail for the first time, and it was launched. It's a very important part of our heritage. And then we moved from this fête of Vieux Grément to a kind of celebration of all seafarers and boats as well. And today,
2 fois au moins à Sail Amsterdam.
I went to Sail Amsterdam. There's the same boats there. You can look at the Schettenstelm, the Seedorf, and major large boats, ships from Russia and others as well. But gradually, we moved from this particular celebration of De Grémont to all seafarers, and naval activities, and which had been military as well for a long time, and also sailing boats, huge sailing boats, IMOCA,
les multicoques, voilà.
Multiple hull boats. And so we have these rather extraordinary events. So less visitors than in Amsterdam. The city of Brest is smaller than Amsterdam, but in 2016, 2020, COVID oblige, there was no celebration, but in 2016 we did have 650 visitors. They pay, they have to pay for an entrance to come to the. So this is something which is very. You can see the bay, which is part of our
dans nos fêtes, aussi l'idée que les
landscape or seascape, and the boats have got to come in. They've got to navigate. They've got to. They go out for the day. They put people on board. Anyone wants to go to sea on a boat, on a ship. And then we have a naval parade between Brest and Bourdonnais, because we've continued with our friends from Bourdonnais, with whom we've kept a very, very good relation. So I have more memories than if I was 1,000 years old, as Victor Hugo. So Victor will be able to talk about it better tomorrow, who was the godfather of many of our festivities for many years, and who still loves it because he loves these big boats and see the tall ships. And you can say 3 or 4 years, you see more the magnificent ships than you can see in a whole year, on a normal year. So the defense of maritime heritage means that there are an opportunity to be able to look at them. But I think this should be a permanent combat.
So, especially during this time of crisis that we've just experienced with ship owners who suffer difficulties, but the city of Brest has always wanted, and Brest Métropole, who is the owner of the leisure marinas, to help those traditional vessels owners to come here, to anchor here, so as to develop their selves here. Amongst the interesting partners, those that matters are the Chantier du Gip. We may talk about them later on. The Chantier du Gip, the Gip shipyard, has built La Recouvrance, who set up some facilities here in Brest, and who has carried out some great projects and built some great ships and sailing vessels for more than 30 years. So you're celebrating the 30th anniversary of this festival, which during this edition will be held especially on the commercial harbor, not the military harbor. Since we didn't have an edition in 2020, the next one will be taking place in 2024, and it will be an outstanding event, as you can see on the pictures, one can see on the screens. I don't know if I can say anything. I could talk about this for, hours on end, really.
On est parfaitement dans les temps.
I think we are right on time. That's great.
Donc le chant, c'est la prochaine fois. C'est le patrimoine fin 23. Vous avez le temps de le préparer, monsieur le maire.
Symposium is can you please sing? Can you please sing? You've got 2 minutes left. Yes, so it is your time if you want to sing, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor of Brest.
No,
I cannot sing it fully. It's up to you. You're at home.
Allons sur le quai Guédon, devant le petit pont, chanter la chanson. Le branle-bas de la croisière et dans sa blanche baleinière. Jean-Bouin, notre brigadier, son bonnet caplé un peu sur le côté, me rappelle mon bâtiment, c'était le bon temps, celui de mes 20 ans. Le bidel capitaine d'armes et son cahier de puni. Dans la Cayenne faisait du charme, ah, je ne sais quelle souris. Mais j'ai dans le cœur une souffrance quand le capitaine Clairon sonnait du haut de recouvrance aux filles de la Ninon. Voilà. Allez.
Merci beaucoup à vous trois.
Thank you very much to the three of you. On that note, on this enthusiasm, on this passion and joy, because this is what we wanted to promote, we shall end, really. I want to thank all of you who have followed us remotely, but also those of you who were on site. Passion, enthusiasm, and joy. You know, that's the three keywords of this session. And a message from Mr. Paul Darvor, Mr. the Ambassador.
Je vous en prie.
Please take the microphone.
D'abord, bravo, parce que vous avez tenu 3
First of all, well done. Congratulations for having this forum, which lasted for 3 years. François has talked, but he's already sang, actually, as well.
D'abord, bravo, non, parce que vous avez...
First of all, congratulations. And I really want to thank Vincent. He's a friend, he's the director of the museum, he's the builder of this great museum. Thank you for being there physically, for attending this event remotely. As well, it's a great idea to have had that session dedicated to maritime cultural heritage. This is what we've done in a way. So we have come up with a proposal. Éric Orsena, a famous French writer, was there. You may have met him. Isabelle Autissier, a famous French sailor, who just arrived from La Rochelle, and who was very interested also by this initiative. Stéphane Bern, who is, of course, very interested into heritage and the restoration of iconic elements of French history.
Il a été quasiment refoulé hier parce qu'il venait prendre son badge.
Came yesterday to get his badge, but he was almost refused. He was taken, and Bernard Rogel, that you may know, who was very recently the head of staff for the Marine Forces, was a friend of us. Along with Bénédicte de Novelli, we proposed the mayor of Brest.
Une forme de qualification, parce que c'est vrai que le cadeau de l'empereur est chez toi, donc
It is true that you're at home, of course. It is your city.
En termes de bateaux qui sont partis de Brest, mais qui sont allés à Paris. Le projet, enfin l'initiative.
The project, the initiative, the commitment that you're making is to rebuild the cadeau d'emploi de la Boussole, which is an iconic ship,
connaît bien l'histoire.
Which is the missing link in the maritime French Navy history. So we want to work with Benedict and all the people I've just mentioned. We want to, they have rebuilt the Hermione,
un bateau navigant,
because we wanted to have a navigating ship with the Hermione.
Qu'on découvre la complexité, l'économie.
While rebuilding the Hermione, we have discovered how difficult it was to build such a ship.
Il est pas mince.
Our project
ce bateau dont
of course, is a complex one as well.
Dit-on, jusqu'au dernier moment.
The King of France, in his era, was interested in its fate. He had an interest in that ship. And the king was really watching his ship leaving the harbor. It was a great adventure of La Pérouse, who left Brest in August the 1st, 1785. And with the unknown of Vanikoro, whose stela is erected in the maritime prefecture. It had a fatal fate, a terrible fate. It is actually at the Museum of Brest. So we're going to do this. It is the commitment. The President of the French Republic will be our ally and shall sponsor and promote these projects. I guess and I hope, I'm pretty sure that the French Republic will support this project. The idea is to build up a structure, to come up with a team on the basis and thanks to both private and public funding, of maybe French funding, but also Australian funding, maybe. We have friends in Australia, and we decided that this would be done in the city of Brest. So we have contacts with the local shipyards. François Guiand shown me a place where he thinks that could be done. I think we can provide him with a raise of applause, really. Yes, a round of applause for this announcement, which is extraordinary. I mentioned previously the Chantier du Grip shipyards and the rebuilding of the La Recouvrance ship. So it is an iconic figure of the French Navy. What we said is that Louis XVI, when he was about to die, asked, do we have any news of Mr. de La Pérouse? I don't know whether that's true or not. People say it's true. I don't know. But it is certain, anyhow, he was very interested in the project and in the ship. So I mentioned the leisure mariners in Brest. The best place where you can see the sea in Brest is the La Pérouse embankment. And I think we need to find the means and to rebuild that ship. So thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for that proposition, that proposal. Yes, the Hermione was a great project. It brought people together, and I think it can be another opportunity for the people of Brittany to do that. Maybe it's going to take 5 or 6 years to come up with a new boat, a new replica. And after a while, okay, the boat's going to be built in Brest. It will be exhibited and shown in Brest, and then it will join the banks of Seine River in Paris, and it will be anchored there in Paris. So it will be another element of our museum. That's what we want to do. I'm very optimistic about the ability we have to do this. I'm sure we'll find the means to do this. I think that the French state must be a stakeholder. The local authorities must be part of this as well.
Il va remonter la Seine. Le Havre.
The Havre also could be part of this project.
Président de l'Association internationale des villes portuaires. Rouen.
Paris, of course, could be other stakeholders. and the National Museum of
il faudra qu'ils s'en occupent.
Navy and of the Army.
Voilà.
Could be other stakeholders. On Friday, you will talk to the French president, and I'm sure you will receive the best welcome for this project. So I want to thank everybody who supported this idea. Thank you. What a day. Congratulations to all of us. We had people singing and very interesting statement. Mr. Poivre d'Armée is perfect. He said that will be done, and it will be done. I'm sure it will be done. It is a great piece of news, a great adventure. The rebuilding of that replica is a great statement and an announcement, really. So we must, of course, now find stakeholders to work with us on this project. It's about time to conclude now. While preparing this forum, we thought we had to respond to 3 key questions. How to promote the conviction that oceans are a shared asset? How can we promote this? How can we share and enrich our vision on the oceans? How can we raise the awareness at the global level? How can we show that we are all repository of a shared challenges and heritage? To these 3 questions, the maritime tangible and intangible heritage, cultural heritage, is outstanding, and through this and thanks to it, 3 main axes can be seen: caring, wearing, sharing. 3 terms that the stakeholders of the maritime community know well. These terms are at the heart of their beliefs and know-hows. 3 words that could be the key for the future of our oceans. 3 terms that represent some fruitful and innovative pathway for the future, because more than ever, the actors of the cultural heritage must be brought together so as to raise the awareness of the people, so that people care for the oceans and share the treasures of the ocean, which can then benefit to the people at large. So if we can bring people together, and that is a big challenge, I want to propose you to seize that opportunity of that forum, which is unique, to establish a unique meeting for and to have a one heritage ocean symposium, so that this meeting can help to foster, promote the preservation of the oceans while putting the culture and the heritage at the heart of those meetings. So let's meet in 2023 so as to continue these debates and to put culture at the heart of what will be at stake and the challenges of the future. So culture will be a leverage in face of the global challenges of the summit. And you have demonstrated this afternoon. Thank you very much. And the last word now, the National Museum of the Marine is open for an evening visit for you, and you can visit it. So I want to thank all the people who took part in this forum. Thank you very much. Good evening. If anybody wants to sing a sailor song, please do so.